welcome everyone. Let me do a sound check and make sure you're hearing me. All right, that sounds good. Necessary evil there. But welcome to everyone. Hey, today is Monday, March 31st. For those who are paying attention and those on the live stream now, last day of March. Uh, Welcome to your last day of March. We'll be into April, which I always love. It's pretty much my favorite month is April. So here we're going into April. By the time this stream ends, we will probably be in April, and some of you may already be there. Now, let me say hello to everyone and just warn you ahead of time that as soon as I'm done with the greetings, I have to go pull a pie out of the oven. So I'm going to have to pause it momentarily, go run in the kitchen, pull the pie out of the oven, and make sure we don't burn it. So please let me do that when the time comes. But in the meantime, I'm gonna and that's how it happens. Okay, starting over. I'll be pulling a pie out of the oven in a few minutes. So let me say hello to everyone here. I believe we got about 5, 10 more minutes on that thing. So just a moment. Let's see. We got Amy. Welcome in, Amy. And Amy is reminding everyone to support the channel via our support pathways, primarily at Cash App and Buy Me a Coffee, and any other way you'd like to support the channel. Hit the thumbs up when you're coming in and join the live chat if you're in the Lurker crew. All of those are great ways to support the channel, and we appreciate it. All right, we got Indiana Nan or Nan here. We have Sweet Dude Shibby. We also have Hebby Brown. All right, Digital, Niobe, Deb, Stephanie, Eliana Davidson, Gretchen Allen, Asha Harry, and Birdie81. Stephanie reminds us to go watch Train Guy. It's very interesting. And yes, please, before we get too far into it, let me remind you please go watch Train Guy. I recently made Train Guy available to the general public so everyone can watch Train Guy. And please do take the time to go watch Train Guy. It's very interesting. And we'll have more on that later. There are developments with that, and it's all good. And we're super proud of the work with Train Guy. And you pay attention to that, and we will be talking about it at some point in the future when we're able to. But there's good things on the horizon with Train Guy, so God bless him and that whole story. Anyway, let me continue, and thank you for Stephanie for mentioning that. Gretchen Allen, Asha Harry, Birdie81, Dirty Diana, Laura Naran. Okay, we got Nicole Watt. Icy Cat. Hello, Icy Cat. All right. We also got Anna Paula Baxter. Welcome in, Anna Paula Baxter. All right. We also have in here tonight um, Dieter. Hello, Dieter. Okay. Hello, Dawn Steele. Welcome in, Siren Cindy. Welcome in. Aaron Town. Welcome in. Crazy Italian Lady. Welcome in. Tracy Fleetwood. Welcome in. Kay. Welcome in. Welcome in. Missouri Mimo of 9, welcome in. Lynn Mai, welcome in. Meow Meow, welcome in. Cromley, Mr. Cromley, welcome in to you. MSW 88, Ricardo 2, um, EWTN, welcome in. Okay. Scott Garner, welcome in. Um, and we're working on it, okay? We're working on it. Rebecca Ann, 1965, welcome in. Okay. See who else I'm missing. Chris Canusa, welcome in. Okay, anyone else I'm missing, just be a gentleman or lady and drop your name in the chat, and I will also say hello to you. But welcome in everyone. Okay, how about that? Christine Daly, welcome in. Um, I don't want to miss anyone. Steve Johnson. Okay, Don Steele, Malibu, Kathy Aldridge, welcome in. Thank you for coming in. Abby Sellers, welcome in. Amanda Knows, welcome into you. Dumplings Gammy, welcome into you. All right, so welcome in everyone. And if you're in the Lurker crew, go ahead and join in. Hey, a lot of you may or may not be butthurt. Don't worry, I'm mean on purpose. So those of you who find me mean, don't worry, I'm mean on purpose. Um, Anyhow, I'm so glad to see you all in here. So tonight, what we will be doing is very interesting to me. So hopefully you will find it equally interesting. Um, so in the past several days, I've been wondering about this lack of transparency. You know, obviously, we don't have any transparency. Actually, what we have is obstruction and and uh, combativeness from the judge. Remember that they are refusing to release any of the public exhibits. Okay, they are making it extremely difficult to release or for anyone to obtain these exhibits. At first, blatantly refusing to and saying that they will not cooperate with a FOIA request. Then, furthermore, saying that they will begrudgingly release the exhibits, but only if you agree to be extorted for $25 each, and only if you absolutely can psychically intuit or predetermine the exact manner in which they expect you to ask for these exhibits. Um, and if you're unable to do that, you may give up the $20 and only receive a blank thumb drive. Uh, or you may receive a thumb drive with only one file for which you properly requested. So, with all of this obstinance, refusal for transparency, and generally withholding of public information as is being done, it's caused a lot of heartache. And remember that we've had this lady and her friends release a video that they are claiming is the original video from the phone that Libby was in possession of on the date that they claim is February 13, 2017, on the phone that they claim is an iPhone 6S, in the victim's hands, they claim, and in a manner that they claim is raw footage that has not been altered, that is not suspicious at all. And we've been doing this head, or this, we've been bumping heads over this because, as I mentioned, I was very unhappy the way that these people felt compelled to release this footage with no provenance, no accurate description of what it is, no chain of custody, and to ensure us that it is being uh, portrayed as the original footage from the victim's phone. So there's a whole lot of things regarding it. Okay, then don't worry, I'm not going to burn the pie. I'm going to give it 2 more minutes. Um, so there's been a whole bunch of heartache over this lack of evidence, and there's been further developments as well. Remember that when I stepped forward, and I could even look at the date. So you remember, I made a lot of people angry because people were demanding to know about this. So exactly 12 days ago, I released a video called Delphi, a commentary on the BG video controversy, in which I told you exactly what occurred and who was responsible for the release of that video and how it was done. And I was pretty mean about it intentionally. And since then, you know, in these 12 days, I've been proven to be 100% correct. And trust me, I have not yet I have not yet explained to you or shown you the receipts that I was 100% correct, but just let it be known, okay, that you wanted to know the truth about that video. I told you the truth immediately when no one else would, and no one else still has, but nevertheless, I have been proven to be correct. So, with all of this heartache over this lack of transparency and all of the controversy over what has leaked, um, it got me to thinking about this trial. And it got me thinking about the attempts at the judge to keep this trial clouded in secrecy so that the public would not see and not remember and not easily be able to reference what occurred because they would not be able to see the footage from this trial. Remember, look, I mean, if you follow Karen Reed at all, just be aware that all you have to do to refresh yourself on what goes on with Karen Reed is what? Pull up the footage from trial, right? So why was the world not gifted that with Delphi? Well, I'll tell you why. Because it's 5 times, 10 times worse of a cover-up, and they don't want the world to be able to reference actual factual documentation of what happened in trial. Anyway, so it got me thinking about that, and got me. I've been upset about it, and so as I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about your response and interest in the AI processing of data, because remember that I did a show or two in which I relayed to you some AI notes and bullet points from my own work. So what I did is I fed in my entire channel into AI and allowed it to process and produce lists and bullet points and narratives and all this. And we went over it on a few shows. And there was a lot of positive feedback. Actually, several people emailed me and requested copies of those documents. And so kind of those two things merged in my mind. And I thought, wow, I should provide for my viewers some transparency about trial, okay? And and as I started thinking about that, I thought, well, geez, what would I feed it? You know, we didn't get the trial coverage. However, we did have Andrea Burkhart. And in my opinion, Andrea provided exemplary coverage of the trial, okay? For better, for worse, okay? At a complete lack or blackout of information, and with a complete courtroom filled with biased, troll farm, state shilling, boot licking, butt licking, McClellan and Gull ass licking um, bias that was provided by the 90% of the coverage, we had Andrea Burkhart, who actually came out and gave us completely thorough unbiased coverage. I mean, somewhat leaning towards a defense perspective, um, being an appellate attorney herself of sorts, but in general, she gave a very comprehensive um, coverage of the trial, the best we could do without cameras in the courtroom. So remember that Andrea went on for 5, 6, 7 hours every day of trial, except the one day she missed, which was the second day of trial proper. And for that, I accessed Caitlin Kendall, who is your next best thing. Okay, so Caitlin Kendall did a very good job overall, being somewhat unbiased compared to all of the other biased individuals. And so what I did is I decided that that's how we would address this, that I would feed uh, all 22 or 23 shows of Andrea Burkhart, 6, 7 hours each, into the AI, and then allow that to produce for us AI compiled notes so that we could step through or walk through the trial of Richard Allen um, via Andrea Burkhart's excellent coverage. Okay, So allow me a moment and let me deal with this troll in here because I don't like this troll. And anyone that's trying to be combative, start shit, or basically be a jackass, well, thank you, Heather. If you're coming in here trying to cause division, just give me a moment. All right, apologize. Apologize. Yes, I was mentioning those who try to cause division. And let me just say, I never did say anything negative about Andrea. I don't have anything negative to say about her. Um, but let's be clear about something. There are snakes in the grass everywhere around Delphi. I know many of you dumbass bitches watch my show solely with the intent of clipping small portions and sending around to people behind the scenes in order to cause some sort of chaos and discord. And you do so often. And let me just make a statement. I would like to see how many of you could actually have the guts, the balls, or the tenacity to sit here and talk for 3 to 4 hours at a time, 4 days a week, producing, I don't know, 10, 12, 14 hours of spoken word per week. And how you would like it if out of those 12 to 14 hours per week, someone would go and clip a 30-second segment and then send to your friends to try to cause disruptions. So anyway, that happens. Okay, that happens. And anyway, that being done with, let me just say that. So what I've chosen to do is I said, you know what? Let's give ourselves a refresher course in the trial against Richard Allen because we're in downtime while we wait for transparency, which we probably won't get. We may or may not get it. I don't know. Um, let me do this. All right. So while we may or may not ever get transparency in this process or in this case, I said, let's take some time on this channel to revisit the trial and figure out what we can do about it. Okay, figure out what we can figure out because remember, no cameras, and remember, we've got no transcripts, right? We've got no exhibits. Okay, we've got no footage. We've got no transcripts. We've got no exhibits. So we basically got nothing. Um, but what we do have is stuff like this. So we'll go through this and we'll remind ourselves of what mostly occurred in the trial against Richard Allen. And I'm assuming that this will probably be maybe a 3 episode attempt at going through this. But literally, we're going to start from jury selection and go all the way through until verdict, okay, and post verdict commentary. And so hopefully we will be reminded of things that we may or may not have forgotten. And that's what we'll be doing. So that's what we're doing tonight. And again, Andrea covered every day except for one day. And as I mentioned, I went and I accessed Caitlin Kendall's work to be able to fill in that gap. But understand that obviously Caitlin Kendall's work is not going to be anywhere near as exhaustive as Burkhart was providing for us. All right. So hopefully you guys are up for it. If you're not, well, I'll see you next time. Like I said, this may be the next 2 or 3 episodes. But hey, the good thing is this. If you happen to miss any of the trial coverage, and listen, honestly, I missed a lot of it myself because there was no way I could sit there for 7 hours at a time every day of trial and get the recap. Um, so for all of us who missed all of that, we will spend the next episode or two in reviewing the trial against Richard Allen in the form of bullet points like this so we get a greater understanding of what actually happened. And before we get into this, let me bring this into it because I would like, I love visual aids. And so I know you may not be able to see this. It's rather unclear. It's difficult. It was a lot. Let's see. No, this doesn't work out too well, right? But I'll tell you what this is. Okay, so I'll read it for you, and it doesn't look as clear as it does for me. But for me, um, it says a trial against Richard Allen, right? And it says it breaks down into categories. So for this, we have categories called gun ownership and firearm analysis. It's a major category. Okay. And then we have interrogation and statements, a major category. Then we have legal and courtroom procedure. Then we have people and roles. Okay. And we have other details. And so, within the gun information, there's things like this is a broad overview here. There's ammunition, distribution of firearms, persistence of the marks, comparison of bullets, fired versus cycle, two mark identification, 6 hour handgun. Rick did not regularly carry it, but carried it for fishing and mushroom hunting. Denies having it on February 13, 2017, as he did not regularly carry it. Okay, then you've got Rick's statements under the category of interrogation, denial of having or loaning gun, his timeline, his interrogation with Holman, his demeanor, his denying of seeing Abby and Libby. Okay, the DNA swabs, he said it was too early to be mushroom hunting. Therefore, he knows he was not mushroom hunting. Um, he did not understand the science. There was the confession statements. Um, there was the talk of inmates killing him. Then it says that's evidence and investigation. Okay, it says there's the bullet found at the crime scene, the witnesses, the um, the Kelsey being the last allegedly to see them, or maybe Betsy Blair, the search warrant, the GPS, the tower data, the cell phone data, the serrated knife versus straight edge, the box cutter, the FBI's grit task force, the aerial photographs of the scene, mitochondrial DNA, hair examination, items collected as evidence. Um, I don't know if I'm skipping ahead or not reading. Okay. Rick Allen, Abby Libby, Lieutenant Holman, Steve Mullen, David Vito, Judge Gull, Andre Burkhart, Doug Carter, Miss Luttrell, Melissa Oberg, Douglas, Weber, Baldwin, Bree Wilbur, okay, Rosie, Weber, Walla, um, Dr. Warren, Mr. Tobin, mental state and behavior, speculation on psychosis, malingering, test to evaluate malingering, behavior in cell, faking, toilet water drinking, poop eating, awareness of self harm, banging of head, beating of self up in the cell, demeanor, PTSD, depressive disorder. Then there's other details: fishing, mushroom hunting, black car, ATMing, and Odinism, and card knowledge, diet, travel, books, uh, search parties, rims on the car, the community support, judicial products, courtroom observations, domestic violence, sex crimes, kidnapping, federal jurisdiction, et cetera, et cetera. So those are some of the overarching themes that popped out in all of the 22 episodes, okay? But what we're going to do is not necessarily focus on those. We're going to focus on the specific notes from every episode. Um, so this is going to pretty much be, how would I say it? A sequential romp through the trial. Okay, what we'll be doing is going from day one of jury selection, as I mentioned, through verdict reading and post verdict response. Um, I don't expect that it will be quick. Like I said, we may be able to do it in 3 episodes or two, who knows? But we'll get started this way, and I'm sure we'll be reminded of a lot. And trust me, what I'm not going to do for you is I'm not going to be breaking out any of the court filings or anything, because we've done that. We've been there, done that. And fair warning to all of you who may be watching um, as future viewers, we will again, okay, we will again in the future be going through a thorough examination of many of the court filings like we've done previously and we will do in the future. But that's not what this will be. Uh, this should be strictly an exploration of Andrea's notes, okay, which is essentially what her Andrea's coverage included her notes plus her commentary. So we'll be doing the same. We'll be going through some details from her notes and some of her own commentary observations. Okay? So there we are. And welcome to everyone coming in. I'm so glad to have you coming in. And let me reiterate what we're doing. Tonight, we will be going through Andrea Burkhart's coverage of the trial of Richard Allen in the Delphi murders case. And we will be looking at these notes taken from all 22 episodes that she provided, um, each being anywhere from 5 to 7 hours long. So this is a very comprehensive, exhaustive uh, look into her coverage, which was rather exhaustive. And anyway, because she is the most reliable source for the coverage. So there we go. And that's what we'll be doing tonight if you're just joining. And I'd like to remind you to hit the thumbs up and thank you for being here, and also ask you to support the channel in whichever ways you feel necessary. Okay. So starting from the first footstep, which is jury selection process and jury composition. Okay. Which is where her coverage begins. And it says that the speaker, and the speaker would be Andrea Burkhart, attended the jury selection for the state versus Richard Allen. The goal was to pick 12 jurors and 4 alternates. On the first day, they went through an initial panel of 52 people. And had 14 out of 16 jurors selected. So on the first day, they went through the initial panel of 52 people and somehow had 14 of the 16 jurors selected. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Think of how quickly, and I remember back, let me just say that I remember back to this day, the first day of jury selection. I remember being astounded that on the first day that they managed to plow through 14 of the 16 jurors. Okay. What that tells me is that's probably part of where the defense fucked up. Okay. And let me just say this. If you think it's verboten to criticize the defense, leave the channel. Okay. Leave the channel. We don't need you. We don't need you. We don't need you taking personal criticism of the defense, who obviously did not do a perfect job. Okay. Because we have no biases here. We have no agenda here. We're not trying to protect or shield or shelter the defense from criticism. We're just trying to call it as we see it. So I remember thinking on that very first day, how in the hell do they get through 14 of the 16 jurors on the first day? And it's probably indicative of why they got a jury that was less than critical, because they rushed through the jury selection process. They probably allowed jurors that should have not been allowed, which shows a lack of due diligence, a lack of thoroughness, and a lack of being particular, with what jurors were brought on board. Okay. But yes, going through 52 potential jurors, they agreed on 14 out of the 16. So that's pretty interesting and pretty terrifying, to be honest with you. The speaker, Andrea, was pretty positive on the panel and the jurors selected. I guess the defense was as well. Okay. The jury was expected to be finalized the next day, right? Which I believe they ultimately did. The jury ultimately was comprised of 8 women and 4 men. 8 women and 4 men. And 2 women and 2 men as alternates. So that's probably a little unbalanced as well. Probably a little unbalanced. I would have chosen not to do so. Not because I'm sexist, as the trolls will tell you, but because I would be looking for a more balanced jury in every way. Judge emphasized the importance of juror privacy and being anonymous, and yeah, whatever on that, Judge. Jurors were advised to keep an open mind. They would be able to take notes and submit questions. Juror may be able to have some discussions about evidence at breaks. Jurors' names were not used in open court, okay? In other words, they were not doxable to the attendees. Many prospective jurors had hardship issues, such as work and childcare, and that's just natural and to be expected, because who the hell wants to ever serve on a jury? I know I didn't want to. I don't want to, but you know what's funny here? The one juror who did step forward seemed to be elated, optimistic, excited, entertained, stimulated by being a being a juror. And you know what was funny? It's funny to me that no other juror has stepped forward. Okay. Out of 16 total, not one other than the one 12-year-old has stepped forward. And I think that's pretty telling. It seemed difficult to get excused for those reasons unless the situation was pertinent. Yeah, because they know that jurors don't want to serve. Let's be honest here, except the one fangirl, similar to Monica Walla. In the initial panel was reduced. The panel observed was not racially diverse. It was mostly white with a few black people. Well, such is the state, or at least the rural areas in the state. Remember, this county. I mean, remember Flora. Let's be real here in Flora. Ask yourself this: at the time of the fires or the Flora fire, how many African Americans resided in Flora? Because I've heard firsthand. Uh, oof, it's bad. It's bad. Okay, so let's continue. The ages of potential jurors were very mixed. Both of the both the prosecution and the defense read off their witness lists, requiring potential jurors to indicate if they knew anyone on the list. And you guys may or may not remember, because I certainly do. I have a memory of an elephant here. Um, I remember the juror questionnaire that went around. Do you guys remember the juror questionnaire? It had an extensive list of individuals. Okay. Let's see what's next. I believe I published it for you on the community page. The acoustics in the courtroom were described as terrible, making it difficult to hear. Yes, and I've also heard firsthand from someone who was sitting in the court that when it came to the audio from the phone that the victim was in possession of on that day, remember that audio? The down the hill audio and all the other stuff? The dat be a gun? Okay. When it came to that audio, a consequence of the bad acoustics in the courtroom was that that bad equipment playing the recording in an environmentally uh, less than optimal acoustical environment, which means the bad acoustics of that courtroom, led to you not being able to hear a damn thing. And so keep in mind that when this jury heard the recording from this phone, it was in a really horrible acoustic environment. So it did the girls no justice to be conveyed to the jury in that way. The witness list were read very quickly by both sides. The state named approximately 53 witnesses, and the defense named approximately 136 witnesses, with some overlapping. Now, I want you guys to think here, because I think you don't understand my fury with the defense. Think about it. 136 witnesses potential for the defense. Now think about how many they called, and think about how prematurely they rested. Now, let me say something else. I've spoken to several individuals who were sitting their butts in the courtroom on the day that the defense rested prematurely. And two of the individuals separately told me the exact same phrase, essentially. And what they both said were, Prof, there was an audible gasp in the courtroom when the defense rested. And I know that to be true because there was an audible gasp in Prof's house when that defense rested. All right, so continuing. The defense's witness list included Todd Click, who was involved in developing the Odinism theory, which has been excluded by the judge. The defense may have named any witnesses or many witnesses to preserve their arguments. The defense read the full jury instruction on reasonable doubt during the jury selection a couple of times. The defense objected to Gull's instruction on reasonable doubt, finding it less strict than the full instruction. Now, that's an interesting point to keep in mind, and I might suggest that we all put this in our notebooks. If you happen to be someone who takes notes, maybe you should put this in your notebook. Put in your notebook that Gull's instruction on reasonable doubt was less strict than the full instruction on reasonable doubt. And that may have come into play in the bizarre decision of the jury to find a unanimous guilty verdict. It says that Gull defined reasonable doubt as being, quote, firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt, and stated that if there is a, quote, real possibility that he's not guilty, then you must vote not guilty. The defense found these standards were not particularly great. Attorneys on both sides wanted to understand how jurors interpret and envision applying the reasonable doubt standard. The prosecutor focused on the CSI question, asking if jurors expect the case to be like the show, or if they need DNA or physical evidence to be convinced. Now, I want you to think about this, okay? I want you to think about this. Think about the prosecutor. The prosecutor obsessively focusing with the potential jurors on the CSI question. In other words, asking those potential future jurors if they expected the case to be like the CSI show, or if they expect or need DNA or other forensic evidence to be convinced of guilt. And that's indicative there, right there, that they had zero forensic evidence proving Richard Allen's guilt, which we know now to be the case. There's zero evidence proving forensically, beyond a reasonable doubt, Richard Allen's guilt. So, of course, the prosecutor was obsessing over it in the jury selection process. Okay. And Andrea comments that the prosecutor seems to be prepping jurors for the weakness of the case regarding physical or forensic evidence. Yes, indeed. Remember, no DNA forensics, no physical forensics, no thumbprints, no fibers, anything like that. And unbelievably, no digital forensics. None. All right, continuing. The prosecutor also focused on the beyond a reasonable doubt standard, using examples to explore the idea of being firmly convinced. Yes, because once again, he knew that this case would be full of reasonable doubt. So, what he tried to do was basically gaslight and emotionally manipulate the jury into agreeing to find beyond reasonable doubt when no such case existed. All right. Now, moving on to the defense. The defense questioned potential jurors about credibility and what factors they would consider. The defense asked if consistency and corroboration of statements were important for judging credibility. Now, this is going to be getting to the Betsy Blair, to the Sarah Karba, and to the Rayleigh Voorhees and the Derek Germans. So all of these witnesses, remember I've said that all of the witnesses were either lying, altering their witness statements to suit the prosecutor, or some sort of mixture of the two. Okay? Just like the prosecutor did the same thing in law enforcement, where they lied, they twisted witness statements, they skewed the timeline by 15, 20, or 30 minutes, either direction. So it's funny that the defense, being aware of this, were trying to question these potential jurors about how they would see or evaluate witness statements and timeline discrepancies and these sorts of things. But obviously it proved fruitless because they weren't diligent enough in their selection process. That says the defense lawyer, Mr. Brad Rozzi, used a chart showing different burdens of proof. Rozzi emphasized that beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest burden of proof. He pointed out that even processes with lower burdens of proof, like applying for Medicaid or Social Security, can be challenging. The defense questioned jurors about whether they would be more or less inclined to believe what a witness said based on their profession, including law enforcement. Now, that's another important point, okay? Remember this. Remember how I've consistently said we've got a huge problem here, okay? We've got a huge problem here because this was a combination of errors that all stacked up to give a guilty verdict, which should never have come. Remember that every time you put a police officer on the stand, whether he be in a suit or in a uniform, that the jury is looking at him in a certain way. They're looking at him as a professional. They're looking at him as if he has honor, integrity, credibility, etc. Okay? So every time a police officer or a representative of law enforcement is sitting their ass on the stand, every single word they say is golden. It's given credibility from the default setting. It carries a lot of weight. And now remember what actually occurred in this trial, that you had an officer like Brian Harshman, who the jurors saw as handsome, respectable, embodying integrity, looking serious and professional, etc. He was allowed to sit there and say that in his willy-nilly opinion, the voice that's on the recording is Richard Allen. When no witness could even look at Richard Allen and say, he's the one that I saw that day. Neither could they look at Richard Allen and say, he's the one I intended to portray in the sketch that I cooperated with law enforcement in producing. No. Yet, Brian Harshman, in a suit or a uniform, with the full prestige of the Indiana State Police and professionalism and handsomeness and seriousness, was able to sit there and say, I believe that's his voice. Willy-nilly, irresponsibly, unethically. Furthermore, he was able to say recklessly that Richard Allen confessed 60 plus times. Now remember, Richard Allen did not confess 65 times. He actually made confession-like statements under duress while being drugged and tortured, abused, and threatened with death, and his family being threatened with death by Odinist and other inmates and cartel members, he made confession like statements less than 5 times. But this law enforcement officer, who was perceived as serious, professional, credible, with integrity, handsome, and legit, he was able to sit there and recklessly allege that there were 60 plus confession like statements because he's psychic, a remote viewer, godlike, and precognitive. And he could definitely tell just based on listening to recorded phone calls that Richard meant confessions 65 times or so as he was talking with his family members on phone calls. That's right. That really happened. All right, so let's continue. And as I mentioned, that what set me off on that aside was that the defense. Oh no, let me. I realize I haven't been thorough. Let me further explain that you had another law enforcement officer in a suit or uniform with the full weighting of the Indiana State Police, with credibility, with handsomeness, with respect, with professionalism, be allowed to allege that what is heard in the audio, in his willy-nilly opinion, were the words, "That be a gun." When at this point, all of you have heard for yourselves this recording, which is allegedly of Libby and Abby, in which what is actually heard is the phrase, "See, this is the path that we go down. There's no path going there, so we have to go down here." Yet, this law enforcement officer, with the full backing of the state police, the sheriff's office, the FBI, the CIA, the ABC, the NBC, the ABC, the NBC, the ABC, X plus Z plus A plus Y, and all in between, he was allowed to sit there and say, "That be a gun." In his uniform, in a suit, with the full backing of the state police, federal police, county police, local police, to knowingly lie to the jury. Yes, it happened. All right, so let's continue. But as you see, that's why the defense explored the extent to which jurors, would defer to an expert witness and to how they would evaluate that credibility. All right. The defense emphasized having a story to tell, not just criticizing the state's evidence. The defense lawyer, Mr. Baldwin, asked if jurors could wait to form an opinion until they heard all the evidence. Baldwin emphasized that it was a significant and important decision requiring careful consideration. Yes, no doubt. I mean, after all, this is just this is just justice for 2 murdered little children and an adult who is claimed to be responsible for that. Most people who wanted to be excused did so for hardship reasons. Well, that's what all potential jurors say. All right. By the end of the prosecutor's questioning, some potential jurors had developed specific ideas about the evidence they wanted to see. Few prospective jurors had prior jury service. The process of questioning strikes and challenges was lengthy and a little obscure. Normally, cause challenges and hardship challenges are handled before preemptory challenges. Each side had two preemptory challenges for the four alternates. The first 12 jurors were seated with a good likelihood on the day following the initial selection. Jurors will be transported to and from the courthouse together. Jurors received assistance with what to pack. The jury will be in session from 9 a.m. with one 10-minute break and no lunch. What? Maybe that meant and a lunch? I don't know. I don't know about that point there. Maybe the AI is confused. Okay, continuing. The trial is taking place in Carroll County Courthouse in Delphi. Courtroom had wooden, uncomfortable chairs. The jurors were allowed to ask questions, and a process for submitting and asking those questions was explained. The jurors had no obligation to discuss the reasons for their verdict after the case. Yes, and we all know that only one very immature, ridiculous juror has even come out. All right. And oddly, don't you all find it very oddly enough, that that one juror has come out who was extremely immature and acted as if this was just a nothing burger? Isn't it odd to you that she chose the murder sheet as the venue in which to step forward? Does no one other than me find that extremely odd? Considering the murder sheet and all of this. I mean, what are the odds? I mean, you only have 1,000 outlets out here, right? You got the Prop, you got Snake, you got Vinnie Politan, you got Court TV, NBC, ABC, WRTB, W this one, W that one. She could have gone anywhere in the world. But she chose the number one platform, the PR Central for the state of Indiana, the Murder Sheet podcast. That's her platform of choice. Come on, man. No one is this stupid. Okay, none of you are this naive. None of this is by accident. Come on. Anyway, moving on. I got a little hung up on that situation. All right. The defense asked potential jurors if they could conceive of a situation where someone might confess to something they didn't do. Yes, like maybe some Odinist guards and some inmates, all smoking spice, threatening to kill you, your wife, and your daughter, and your mother-in-law. The defense has explored the concept of a breaking point where individuals might say anything. Yeah, I don't know, like being threatened with all of that and forcibly medicated with Haldol on top of Prozac in the midst of a psychotic episode. Yeah, sure. Especially when you're being fed it by someone who has infiltrated not only the prosecution inner circles, but also the defense inner circles, being in the group chat with the Unraveling Girls, with Bahamada, with Carol Weinecke, with Michael Osbrook, and with other individuals who were defense friendly, quote unquote. Did we forget that ever happened? The defense questioned psychiatric stress and its impact on performance, key evidence, and arguments. You guys chill out. I got the damn pie out 30 minutes ago. What are you tripping about? You don't remember when I said I got to go get the pie out? Okay. No, please explain Riviera 1127. Who is she related to? Please spell it out for us idiots. You know, we're not that smart. I appear to be smart because I speak to the camera, but trust me, we're not that smart. Explain it like we're dumb, please. We want to know about Kathy Shank. mean, we already know her Eastern Star and Masonic connections. And we also know Brad Holders and Logan Holders and Nicholas McClellan's and Doug Carter's and Mike Patty's and possibly Jerry Holman's and Tony Liggett's and I don't know everybody else involved in this. We'd like to know what other connections she might have that are relevant. Okay. So. Oh, really? How? Like I said, explain it to us like we're explain it to us like we're 5 years old. How is she related to the prosecutor then? Because we don't know that much. We're dumb. Okay, let's see. Interesting. You're free to email me that family tree connection or whatever evidence you have of that at any time. I'd really appreciate that. All right, next up. Now, this is probably so. Let me remove this and do my little speech. All right. So that was clearly the jury selection process that we just plowed through. So good job, ladies and gentlemen. Somehow within an hour, I believe we got through 3 days of jury selection, or something like that. So you see, like it's worth your time. It's worth your time. Yes, that was an hour, but we said hello to everyone. Prof rambled a bit, and then somehow we got through 3 days of jury selection. So good job. See, it's worth your time. Trying to convince you to keep watching. All right, so let's continue. Now we're on to first day of trial, I believe, which is the prosecutor's mini statement described the case as being about bridge guy and a bullet and the brutal murder of 3 girls. The number of girls was later corrected to 2. All right. Of course, I'm going to have to pull this down and go on a 30-minute rant about this. I'm sure you all remember this because I remember when I heard this. Now, see, there's a lot of you who don't understand what the troll farm is, and you might not believe that it exists, and you think I'm a conspiracy theorist and I made it all up. That's okay. You'll be proven wrong later. Bridge guy, a bullet, and a brutal murder of 2 girls. Well, you guys may or may not remember that when McClellan did that the troll farm went berserker on those talking points. Listen, we're not stupid over here. So the prosecutor, he did his mini opening statement. He said, bridge guy, a bullet, brutal murder of 3 girls. So I need you to think like you actually can all think for yourselves. Bridge guy, point number 1. It's interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you knew from the beginning with that opening statement, bridge guy, bullet, brutal murder, you could already see the direction this was going, which is not any mystery. I mean, this is the Gray Hughes narrative, right? This is the douche intuition, douche crew, douche crew. This is your state's narrative, which was fabricated by Kelsey German, Gray Hughes, and Sleuth Intuition. Now, you'll remember bridge guy. Okay, so that tells you point number 1 of the nexus. That means there's 3 nexuses. It's kind of like a Rubik's cubes. It's a Rubik's cube. You know, think about this. A Rubik's Cube is a puzzle in 3 dimensions. Okay, so this particular puzzle is a 3 dimensional puzzle. First dimension is bridge guy. Okay, this means that Nicholas McClellan, just like Gray Hughes, douche intuition, and Kelsey German, they were going to use bridge guy as an essential nexus point of conviction, meaning Richard Allen is a bridge guy. Okay, that was essential. This is a 3 dimensional puzzle. So the way they put it together, number one, bridge guy. Bridge guy, bullet, brutal murder. Okay, bridge guy. Gotcha. You're going to make Richard Allen bridge guy. Gotcha. No proof of it. It's totally a fantasy, right? There's zero proof, but just fantasy. Okay, bridge guy. The next part of this structure is bullet. Okay, so you're going to make the bullet touch Richard Allen. Remember, these are nexus points. These are nexus points. So bullet equals Richard Allen. That's another nexus. So you've got bridge guy. Well, I should do it this way because this is, okay, dimension one. Bridge guy, dimension one. Dimension two, bullet. So the other thing that puts Richard Allen as the guilty party is bullet. So you start the ball rolling with the assumption that you're going to prove that the bullet creates this nexus. All right. And then thirdly, in this third dimension, brutally murdered. So you're alleging that in this one-dimensional bridge guy, in the two-dimensional bullet makes him the bridge guy, makes the three-dimensional murder occur. Therefore, in all 3 dimensions, you put this puzzle together, Richard Allen is your guilty party. Well, that would be nice in a fantasy world where no one critically thinks, where no evidence is ever required for a conviction, and where projecting some sort of fantasy world narrative actually works. Because for me, it's a huge problem. First of all, bridge guy, there's zero proof of bridge guy involved, but you could say that this recording from the phone that the victim was in possession of at the time might indicate that the individual filmed on this recording might have had some contact with the girls. But that's a far cry from proving that that individual was responsible for the way that the girls' bodies were ultimately found there. And further, the bullet, right? The bullet. Well, it's astonishing because, see, anyone who actually uses firearms knows without a shadow of a doubt that the ballistics expert here for the state did not convey the truth to the people of Indiana, because there's absolutely no way you could ever convince an expert marksman who has real world experience with firearms, who knows how they work, that it would take the firing of a round to produce marks that would match an unspent round, an unfired round that has merely been extracted. There's no one on earth. I mean, you cannot find one single person on earth who is sober minded, who knows firearms, that would agree to that statement. But somehow, the state of Indiana was able to produce an expert to take the stand as an expert for the state to convince the jurors who knew nothing about firearms that that is an actual possibility. And remember, we still don't have any of it. We have none of it. Like, how is it possible? Wouldn't you all out there love to see these side by sides of this extracted versus this fired round? I'm sure you would. I would too. So that I could debunk it. And so that I could reach out to 5 other YouTubers who cover firearms and are actual experts to come and get their day in the sun on the Delphi murders by explaining how it's an actual impossibility, that it would produce, it would require the firing of a round to produce a result that proves an unfired round that's merely extracted. But some of you don't know shit. You've never fired a gun. You actually hate guns, and you think that all guns should be outlawed. That's why you're libtards. Anyhow, sorry I'm getting a little off track. I'm just a little upset about this bullet being the second dimension of Nick McClelland's three-dimensional projection of Rich Guy, Bullet, and Brutal Murders onto Richard Allen. Now, thirdly, there's Brutal Murders. Brutal Murders. Yes, Brutal Murders. Yes. So if you reverse engineer this, you start with the if you hate brutal murders, you start with the assumption that I hate brutal murders. Yes, I hate brutal murders. And then you reverse engineer it and you look at it and you say, boy, this crime scene was brutal. Look at that girl. Look at Libby. See, this is why those crime scene photos should be public exhibits, not under seal. I mean, why not? Don't you owe those victims the respect and transparency of showing what was done to them so that maybe the truth about what was done to them can come to the surface? Because somebody brutally murdered those girls. Somebody's. I mean, remember, they left one girl who was strong and athletic, brutally murdered, completely nude, with 0 defensive wounds. Then they left another girl brutally murdered, but with only a surgical incision in the side of her neck. Fully dressed, but in someone else's clothes. It's pretty sadistic. You left them there in the woods with sticks formed in geometrical formations with right angles, clearly resembling factually accurate bind runes on their bodies, and one over a pool of blood. So a pool of the naked girl's blood has an identical replication of the bind rune in sticks over it that exist on the dead body of the clothed girl. But it's all fantasy, right? It's all conspiracy. It's all a fairy tale, according to the prosecutor. But all that shit was allowed. And that was your prosecutor's mini opening statement. Bridge guy, a bullet, and a brutal murder. And like I said, what many of you may have missed because you don't know who the troll farm is, what the troll farm is, or where the troll farm is, what you might have missed is that the troll farm took this projection, this mini opening statement, this fabrication, this fantasy, this complete and utter disrespect to these two victims. Troll farm took this and ran with it. Glorifying this thing. Bridge guy, a bullet, and a brutal murder of two girls. Um, let's continue. It says that Burkhart believed the case was weak and centered on the bullet, bolstered by Allen's coerced confessions. Yes, exactly. That's why I like her. Now, we know that science of ballistics regarding what was portrayed does not exist. It was a complete lie. Like I said, if you look at all of these witnesses and experts and family members, they all lied. Remember this. I'm going to take it down again because I don't give a shit. We're not trying to plow through this that quickly. Let me ask you this. All of you here, I would say at least 30% of you have followed the Delphi murders for 7 years. Let me ask you this. What was always the story about Sunday? What was always the story about Sunday before these girls' bodies are found? I hate to be mean about it, but I just feel like I have to speak truth into people's ears. So I often get serious when I want to be laughing with you all. Who was it that transported these girls allegedly on Sunday? Hmm. Right, right. Difficult question. Difficult question, isn't it? Because somehow the story changes. Somehow the story changes. For 7 years, just like the clothing that Libby was allegedly in, remember? For 7 years, that girl was in a certain outfit, which suddenly changes upon the release of the crime scene photos, which prove otherwise or would indicate otherwise. And then you go and you look at what actually had been said for 7 years about who transported those girls on that Sunday. And then magically, the father of one of the girls takes the stand and he says, I, contrary to popular opinion, I transported those girls' bodies on Sunday. The defense had a mini opening statement which focused on Mr. Allen's confessions, confessing to facts which were not true. Ha! I feel a laugh coming on. Richard Allen confessed that He took that gun and shot two girls. You remember the gun that he now says he didn't have because he wasn't mushroom hunting, and he didn't carry that gun other than if he was mushroom hunting or fishing. Allen says he shot the girls. Allen says he raped the girls. And he's sorry for it. But oddly enough, you got two girls who the medical examiner says were not shot and were not raped. But hey, if his confessions are golden, even though they were done under psychosis, under forced medication, under threat of death to him and his family, and someone tell me, how is it that his accurate confessions would also include that he shot the girls and raped them when they were not shot or raped? But we're stupid. But we're stupid. We're conspiracy theorists. We're making the Richard Allen, Free Rick Allen people look uncredible. Okay. The defense argued accurately that Mr. Allen admitted to facts that were not true. I mean, after all, are the girls shot in the back or are they not? The defense suggested accurately that psychologists would testify that the circumstances were conducive to false confessions. Remember this, you guys, because I know it's easy to forget. Remember this. Even Dr. Walla's supervisor stated Mr. Allen was under a deep psychosis episode and forcibly medicated at the time he gave those confessions. But of course, we just ignore reality. We ignore the facts. We ignore the experts. And we believe Nick McClellan and some lying ass cops. Because that's what we do. When we're burying a case of the double murder of two little girls by a group of people who we don't want to acknowledge even exist. All right. Let's continue. Sorry, I'm a little upset reading this shit. All right. The defense distinguished between soft evidence, which is the bullet, and hard evidence, which is phone data. Yes, so we know they had no soft evidence and they had no hard evidence. They had zero evidence, but they convicted unanimously a guy of a double homicide, two little kids. Yeah, it happened. The defense criticized the ballistics evidence, questioning its scientific foundation and the claim that Mr. Allen's gun is the only one that could have produced the markings. Remember, if that was true, let me ask you this question, because I also know guns. I own a guns. Let me ask you this. When the FBI was looking for a Smith & Wesson or a Sig Sauer, how is that even possible? Let me ask you that. How is it possible that if you have definitive marks on a gun that you can absolutely say belong to this gun, how is it possible that it's so broad that it's two manufacturers? Like, think about it. So when it comes to this bullet, it's so broad that it's not only contingent upon one caliber of one gun, one model. It's broad enough to encompass two manufacturers who each produce multiple versions in that caliber. So think about this. It's not only one and two, It's 1 in 4 or 5 or 6 because I haven't even researched yet. I know it's at least two. 6 Hour at least produces two 40 caliber guns. Smith and Wesson at least produces two 40 caliber firearms, probably three. So it's at least 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 6. It's not 1 in 2, but it's that broad. Sorry, I get a little upset. It's my personality. Okay. Ballistics evidence, which should have never been allowed in court. They questioned its scientific foundation and the claim that Mr. Allen's gun was the only gun that could have produced the markings. Yes, by the way, are you aware that Brad Weber owned the identical firearm? It's also possible that Ron Logan did, because are you aware that Ron Logan, well, I'm going to blow some minds tonight. I don't mind it. Let me remove it again. Are you aware that Ron Logan owned over 100 firearms that were kept in his house? Are you aware of that? In case you didn't know, let me educate you. Mr. Logan had at least 100 firearms in his home. Mr. Weber owned an identical firearm to Mr. Allen. And if these people could not even limit it to a manufacturer, how on the earth could they limit it to one person? All right, so let's continue. The defense pointed out that the phone data was hard evidence that the state police were ill-equipped to understand, noting infighting between the FBI and local police. Yes, another question. Who in their right mind, when you're a podunk, look, let's speak frankly here. Let's speak frankly. Who in their right mind would ever believe that in a podunk little town like Delphi, which look, if you haven't been there, take a trip. A podunk shit little town like Delphi, do you honestly believe that a podunk shit little town like Delphi would ever, if it was honestly trying to get to the bottom of a double homicide of two of its children, do you honestly believe it would ever kick off the entire resources of the FBI? Think about it. What kind of podunk little town with a shit little police department would ever kick off the FBI and its vast resources from a case of a double homicide against two of its children? Wake up call. This is a Barry job. It's a protect the protected people job. It's a Masonic cover up. It's a good old boy structure that has existed since the formation of the KKK in Indiana. Do I need to spell it out any more clearly for the retards in the back? Now, sorry, I take it personal. Okay. Oberg, the analyst, the scoundrel for the state of Indiana, Oberg, performed the ballistic comparisons. I'm telling you right now, there's two of you who are about to be booted. So you might want to shut the fuck up in the chat. And you know who you are. You're two trolls in the chat. I would shut up. I'm allowing you in here, but you're about to be out. So just keep on. Now, this Oborg, stated she has never been wrong. Never. Never been wrong. Ever. Can any of you say you've never been wrong? But she has found errors in the work of her subordinates, which means passing the buck. All right. The defense argued that the state's ballistic claims lacked a valid scientific foundation. Well, finally, they say something true. If the defense would be this spot on with every statement, they might have won this. The ballistics claims of Oberg in the state of Indiana lacked valid scientific evidence. Like I said, whenever you hear from actual experts, you're going to be furious. It's just like the that be a gun. When you hear it for yourself, you're going to be furious that this lie was allowed to be conveyed to a jury, or you're going to be furious when you realize the lie about these ballistics was allowed to be conveyed to a jury. The defense plans to rely on an expert to explain the limitations of ballistics in this case. All right, anyone else want to get kicked out? Just keep fucking with me in my chat. My chat doesn't have to put up with your bullshit. Keep on. Let's see. The defense planned to present a case that involved more than just reasonable doubt. Then why the hell did they rest early? The defense witness list is significantly longer than the prosecution's. Then why in the hell didn't they present those witnesses? The defense would argue that the state's theory of the case would need to change as evidence comes out and cannot be reconciled with the current theory. Well, they dropped the ball. The defense highlighted discrepancies in the timeline according to the state's theory. Then why didn't they prove it? The defense addressed the bullet and the confessions, arguing that neither matters if the phone data shows otherwise. The defense planned to show videos of Richard Allen in his cell. He was watched 24 hours a day. Yes. Now, regarding that, let's have a little talk because this is going to hurt feelings. Just give me a moment to sneeze. All right, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Now, I'm glad that I lost track because let me hit the reset button. Um, so let's see, where are we? Phone data. Richard Allen and so okay, this is what I was going to say. Because see, these exhibits will come out. But I've got to do a little bragging right here. Some of you don't understand that I have good sources. So not only do I I'm not going to say anything. Look, I got good sources and I got good sources. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. Trust me. If you don't trust me yet, you will in the future. I got good sources. Now, let's see. Let's talk about this. Do you realize that some of this evidence from Westville shows things you would not believe? You'll all see it with your own two eyes someday if the judge ever lets it out. You'll not believe what you're going to see. You don't know what was going on, and I'm not going to baby walk you through it, but listen, let me explain it for the stupid people in the back. Let me give you an example. You take Richard Allen, for example. He's in a cell with brick walls and iron doors. Now imagine if you're a man of his age, of his weight, in an iron and brick environment. And imagine if you're running full speed as hard and fast as humanly possible and running into that iron door or that brick wall. Imagine how that would look on tape when you're being recorded constantly. Imagine how you would look in the days after that sort of activity. Hey, if Shane Meehan, who brutally murdered FBI agent Greg Ferenczi in cold blood after baiting him or luring him out of his building, if he's not fit to stand trial, how in the hell was Richard Allen? Is Shane Meehan damn near killing himself? Wherever he's kept. All right, let's see what we got here. Let's see. We're gonna go with the defense noted that 40 caliber ammunition and 6-hour firearms are common. Some of the most common calibers for law enforcement to hold, especially back in the day, and 6-hour being one of the most famous are common firearms that people carry. Although it's a stupid move, I would highly suggest Smith and Wessons or Walters. But 6 hours, that particular gun is not drop safe. It's a stupid gun. No one should own that gun, but people do. Anyway, being that 6-hour is one of the most common firearms, 40 caliber was one of the most or the most common caliber for law enforcement in 2017 and prior. This raises the possibility that a police officer, law enforcement officer, state police, federal police, Indianapolis Metro PD, some sort of LE, including Brad Weber or Ron Logan, could have had a similar gun and dropped that round. Michael Lewis, that'll get you out of here. That'll get you out of here. 40 caliber is not suck, my brother. It kicks the balls out of 9mm. If If there's anything that's gonna get a fight between Prof and the chat, it's saying that 40 cal sucks. I'll get your ass out of here in a heartbeat. I'm preferential to the 40, my sir, as far as handguns go. But I mean, let's be honest here. Like I said before, 9mm are cheaper. They're loaded hot these days. So 40 cal, sort of antiquated, but still awesome. 9mm will probably do just fine for most folks, most of the time. But shit, let's be honest here. If we're really going to gaslight, 22 is just fine. Nothing wrong with a 22. I mean, that's killed plenty of people. If you don't know, just go Google it. And they're about 100 times cheaper than any of the aforementioned calibers. Jesus Christ. Okay, let's continue. This is a hot take here. Brad Weber's 40 cal Sig Sauer was tested and not excluded. Woo! That's a rough one. That's a rough one, right? Brad Weber's was not excluded. All right. Exactly. Let's beat up on Michael now. It's all the 40 lovers get to beat up on Michael Lewis. Oh, but seriously, at least we can agree on one thing, which is that we don't agree on caliber. Okay. Now let's continue. The defense will call Dr. Warren to be critical of the ballistics testing. The bullet was found not to have been fired, only cycled. The testing involved cycling a pristine bullet through Richard Allen's gun, which did not. Wake up call for Troll Farm. Cycling a pristine 40 caliber round through Richard Allen's gun did not produce markings that matched the one found. So they fired a bullet. It's true. This is called Fantasy World. Remember, it's where Nick McClelland is right, Tony Liggett is honorable, Tony Blesenby never lied, Benjamin Diener never did anything illegal, and the entire troll farm are the righteous victim advocates on the case. Oh, it's opposite world, basically. When we say the Delphi murders is Twilight Zone, we're not exercising hyperbole. Okay. Oh my gosh, man. Oh my gosh. Now, let's continue. I can't even seriously read that. Okay. The defense argues that comparing an unfired bullet to a fired cartridge casing is not apples to apples. Well, oddly enough, you know what was funny? Because Turbo, when we're talking about Troll Farm, listen, Turbo's a fucking troll farm. Okay. Apples to oranges, apples to apples, apples to oranges. Turbo, fuck off. Okay. You're always wrong. You're a bootlicker. Like all of your other weirdos, you're weird. It's not an apples to apples comparison. Baldwin was absolutely factually correct. It's not even a good analogy. I would not have brought apples and oranges into it. I would just say you're insane if you think you're going to compare a fired by cycling. You can cycle 1,000 rounds through this thing and eject them. They're never going to match. But if you fire one, it might. Come on, man. Come on, man. It's not even apples to oranges. This is like apples to skyscrapers, which is what he should have said. He should have said this is like this should be apples to apples, but this shit is apples to skyscrapers. Anyway, I mean, look, let's be honest. This defense failed Richard Allen immensely. And anyone who has a problem with me saying that, then go convince Richard Allen that they succeeded. Okay. All right, let's continue. The defense believes the jurors will be able to see in photographs the bullets don't match. Well, maybe the world will, because maybe one day, I mean, and this is really hoping for a lot, but maybe that those exhibits, which are property of the citizens of the state of Indiana, the public exhibits, which should have been released. I mean, after all, sentencing was when? Let's be honest here. These exhibits, which we still don't have our eyes on, maybe someday they might be released. I mean, it could be 6 months from now, could be a year from now, could be a week from now. We don't know when or if these exhibits will ever be released, although they are property of the public. Maybe we will see in photographs that these bullets don't match. I can't wait for that day. I also can't wait for that day to produce the same for you, because I'm going to take a Smith and Wesson, and I'm going to take a unspent ejected 40 caliber cartridge or round, and I'm going to also show you a fired 40 caliber cartridge, and I'm going to show you myself in excellent 4K photography with my, what do you call it? I have this, the lenses for photographing close up. I have some really nice lenses for my camera. I'm going to get my camera. I'm going to photograph with that really nice lens the markings on my unspent versus fired. Yeah, the macro. Thank you, Aaron Townsend. I'm Angel here. So I'm going to get my macro lens, and I'm going to photograph close up the markings on my ejected versus my fired. I'm going to show you how it's two different things, but we'll also compare that with the exhibits from trial. Like this bullet point here says, what is it? It's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, it's number 5. It's the fifth one down. The defense believed the jurors would be able to see in photographs that the bullets don't match. I can't wait till we can see it out here in the public like we should have at least, I don't know, what, 4 months ago? The defense mentioned the concept of subclass in firearm manufacturing, where similar guns produce similar markings. The defense argues that the magic bullet is of zero value. Remember, even the juror, as insane as she is, this juror even said, we disregarded the bullet. It didn't seem credible. The defense did a good job. Even the jury didn't take this bullet seriously. But remember, this is one of the three. You had a trilogy or a trifecta here in Nicholas McClelland's Bridge Guy, Bullet, Brutal Murder. So the central axis in that being Bullet, even the jury didn't believe, but they still found him guilty. All right. Let's see. Let's continue to the next one. I have a hard time getting into this without laughter as well. Let me just say this. Betsy Blair, something doesn't sit right with me with Betsy Blair. Okay? I don't know how to explain it without projecting my own animosity and anger onto Betsy Blair. But I just got to say, any of you who paid attention to this Betsy Blair, with the coming and going and the coming and the going and the coming and the going and the coming and the going, somebody explain what the fuck she was doing and how it makes sense. I don't know. I'm a little bitter about Betsy Blair. I'm also bitter with Tony Liggett for taking the concept of a 1965 comet. You know, Betsy Blair, who says her father owned a 1965 comet, and that 1965 comet that she was very well familiar with, that her father had owned, which, anything your father owns, like for instance, my father once owned a Chevy Nova. I'll never forget what a Chevy Nova looks like because, first of all, I rode around in one. I was a kid. It was a vintage vehicle. I remember them. I've seen photos of them since. I know what a Chevy Nova looks like. I would assume Betsy Blair knows what a comet looks like. For her to say that the vehicle she saw resembled a Mercury comet or a 1965 comet, not a 1975, not a 1985 or a 95, but a 1965 comet similar to that which her father owned and that she even sketched. And for Tony Liggett to be allowed to take that vehicle and morph it into Richard Allen's contemporary Ford Focus, it's an insult to everyone's intelligence here. It's also pretty alarming that he decides to omit that from the PCA for Richard Allen. Just completely omit it. Completely omit it. In other words, pretend it doesn't exist because it screws up what he's trying to do, which is to turn five other vehicles. Remember, he's trying to turn five other vehicles into Richard Allen's Ford Focus. He's trying to turn a dark SUV with stickers on it. He's trying to turn a purple PT Cruiser, a smart car, a Mercury Comet, and a white car with paper plates. He's trying to turn all those cars into Richard Allen's Ford Focus. And he does so. And everyone's just okay with it. And you've got a conviction for a double homicide on Richard Allen. Everyone just thinks that's okay. You think that as long as a bunch of Masons do this, that it's okay? Everyone's good with that? And what if it's you? Anyway, let's continue. I'm getting a little angry. But Betsy Blair, who's for some reason going back and forth and back and forth and back, acting real fucking weird. She's expected to be a very important witness. There's discrepancies regarding the car that she saw. The defense will try to undermine the credibility of any confessions suggesting they were coerced or the result of feeding Mr. Allen information by Miss Monica Walla, who, as I mentioned, was in prosecution, text chains, and insider social media groups, as well as in defense attorney insider text chains and prosecution groups that included Matt Hoffman, who works for attorney Andy Baldwin. And you think that's okay? Good point. Thank you, Carla. Before we even get into keep in mind that all the witnesses who described this bridge guy described him as tall, muscular, and in all black, none of which fit Mr. Allen. But that's okay too, right? It's okay when we're railroading someone as part of a conspiracy on the part of the state to just Forget all the reality of the situation. Okay, sorry. I'm going to keep going. Um, and remember, they funded an entire PR contingent, who I affectionately termed the troll farm, to harass, stalk, intimidate, threaten, and basically silence all of us who dared to question the state's narrative or the Masonic narrative. But we're going to pretend that never happened either, although receipts exist for all of it, some of which you haven't even seen yet. But of course, I'm just making it all up. Well, let's continue. Um, the defense questioned family members about the victims' personalities. The state presented a mini opening statement focusing on Bridge Guy, a bullet, and a brutal murder. The state emphasized the bullet. In other words, fantasy world evidence and statements made by Mr. Allen. Fantasy world evidence. The state asked family members about the search for the girls. Oh, the search where everyone lied. The search where for 19 hours you didn't find two dead bodies sitting right there within eyeshot. Especially when at least, I don't know what, 8 or 9 of those hours consisted of broad daylight. I'm talking about from 3:30 p.m. to about 7 p.m. on the 13th, and about 7:30 a.m. to about 12:15 p.m. on the 14th. All of those hours of broad daylight, no one sees a thing, but we're supposed to believe the family members and the searchers' narrative about the search for those girls. Sorry, don't make sense. Never will. Never has. Never will. Okay. It keeps on getting. It keeps on getting interesting. A deputy was questioned about following up on tips, noting that no tips concerning Richard Allen were investigated initially. Yeah, but we know one thing, sir. The tip on Richard Allen that Kathy Shank magically produced just before the contentious election, before Allen's arrest, we know that tip certainly had one indication or marking on it, which was cleared, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of like how do not investigate was marked on the tip referring to the train guy. The one in which I've posted the witness of this train guy who identically matched bridge guy, old guy sketch, and who knew intimate details of the crime scene in June of 2017. Why was that tip about train guy marked as do not investigate? Okay, let's keep on going. The state's expert on the bullet is expected to testify. And oh, she did, boy. Oh, boy, she did. The state filed a motion to exclude composite sketches, which were produced under duress at the objection of the witnesses during the investigation. And we've shown you all those receipts. Remember, Sarah, Betsy, and Rayleigh Voorhees all objected to producing those sketches. They were forced to provide those sketches. They did not agree about those sketches. And none of those sketches were ever deemed relevant. Remember that ISP said, hey, the old guy is not the new guy or the young guy, and the young guy is not the old guy, and the old guy's been cleared, no longer person of interest, and the new guy is the person of interest. And then Doug Carter conflicts with that, and he says, or he contradicts it, and he says, no, the old guy is the new guy, and the new guy is the old guy, and the sketch is not a photograph, photograph is not a sketch, and one's behind the other, and the other behind her, and whoever fetch the gun, and the judge is clear, the judge signed the probable cause affidavit. Sorry, I'm getting a text. But no one finds any of that alarming. But let's continue. But the states managed to exclude these sketches, remembering that none of the witnesses could ever point at Richard Allen and say, he's the guy, and he's the guy I saw that day. Neither could they point at Richard Allen and say, he's the guy I tried to portray in the sketch. No, they couldn't do either of those. So they excluded the sketch. They excluded having the witnesses say, I saw him. And the judge, of course, signed off on all this, like she did everything that favored Nick McClelland. The state argued the composite sketches are hearsay. The state also argued that any reference should be excluded. Of course they did. The state argued that the sketches are interpretations and synthesis, potentially influencing witnesses. Defense argued that excluding the sketches limits their ability to challenge the investigation. Yes, because how do you ever... Listen, have you ever seen a case? People tend to forget the obvious things like this. Put yourself in your own shoes. Back in 2019, when these sketches abruptly changed. Put yourself in your own shoes back then, and how you were flabbergasted. How does the POI transform from an old guy? How does he suddenly become 20 years younger with a completely different appearance? Remember, everyone was literally floored when that happened. In 2019, when these sketches abruptly changed, everyone was flabbergasted, like minds blown. What in the world is going on here? Family, friends, citizens, even investigators. Remember, we spoke to some law enforcement officers. Even they were flabbergasted. State could not explain that. I mean, the public was so mystified that even the ISP had to produce a written press release clarifying the sketches and the change of sketches. And when they did so, they said, this old guy is no longer a person of interest. Now the young guy is a person of interest. They're not the same person. Remember all of that? Of course you don't, because most of you don't remember what happened yesterday. Yes, they're not the same person. The old guy's no longer a person, blah, 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 blah. Yet, this judge says, no, not only can you not talk about that, you also can't ask the witnesses, is this who you saw? And is Richard Allen the person that matches this, or that you intended to... You see? Or is Richard Allen the person you saw? None of that could be done. And Doug Carter, the whole time, he's doing his whole mystified magician shit, which is part of his Freemason pledge. Well, mystical shit, believe every word I say. I'm an actor on a stage. This is a religion. He's doing the mystify you shit. A sketch is not a photograph. It's not a sketching. And oh no, we want justice for the girls. Good point. Thanks for the super chat, Jake Brooks. Great fucking point. Another word on the sketches. We have reason to believe he may be in this room. He may be watching. Richard Allen handed out medicine to everyone. Remember, CVS was the only pharmacy. Everybody knew Richard Allen. He's handing you your medicine. He's handing you your fucking, I don't know, tampons. He's handing your photographs that are processed for 5 years. sketches posted in the building and in everywhere in town. And no one says, hey, that Richard Allen, are you telling me Betsy Blair never went to CBS? Not even once? And said, hey, he's the guy that I remember seeing out there. Okay, fair. So am I now supposed to believe that even Sarah Karba, who, remembered enough to produce a sketch, you're saying that even she, who saw this muddy, bloody guy who looked like he just slaughtered a hog, even though she only said bloody after the third interview in 2019, and she had only said muddy, but even though her story changed, which means she's lying, and blah, 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 even she never went in CBS and saw him and said, hey, he's that guy that I intended to sketch. Or really, Voorhees never said, hey, he's that guy. Or her sister, Bree Wilbur? No one? I mean, wouldn't you consider Richard Allen's job to be a public-facing job? I mean, his wife, okay. Yeah, you could say his wife is private, right? His wife is private. She's not working the counter at the pharmacy. All right, let's continue. Sorry, I'm getting a little pissed. But we exclude the sketches. They're hearsay. They're going to be used to point out the fact that law enforcement's been lying for 7 years. Of course, that's not going to work. Can't challenge that investigation. Continue. The state filed a motion regarding the civil settlement from 2012, which Judge Gull granted, excluding any reference from it. Now, see, I don't know anything about this. Who knows something about that first bullet point there? Let me remove myself and show it to you guys clearly. Maybe some of you, who knows about this first bullet point? This is new to me. The state also filed a motion regarding the civil settlement from 2012, I-pass settlement, which Judge Gull granted, excluding any reference to it. I don't know. Next, the state wanted to exclude any testimony from Mr. Tobin, the defense's metallurgy expert. The state argued Mr. Tobin is a metallurgist, not a firearms expert. The defense argued Mr. Tobin's expertise in metallurgy and material science is relevant to the methodology. 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 Well, maybe we are talking about Delphi after all, because we're talking about methodology. Let's talk about what was going on at trails on Sunday and Monday of 2017, February 12th and 13th. No, we don't want to talk about the methodology of Delphi because that might actually lead to the fucking killers. So we'll never talk about that. We'll never talk about Derek German. We'll never talk about Becky's sister. We'll never talk about Anna buying meth. We'll never talk about any meth when it comes to Delphi because, of course, that doesn't have anything to do with this. So we'll just leave the math out of it. So we'll leave the methodology alone. Okay, sorry. I got a little sidetracked. Anyway, back to this. We're talking about the defense noted Mr. Tobin's extensive experience, including his time at FBI and his testimony in the landmark AA case regarding the reliability of firearms analysis. Hey, thank you, K Special. Thank you, KK. Thank you, KK. You're so sweet. What's up, Citrus? I'm trying to get through this. I get sidetracked because I get super, super, super duper pissed. It's like I can't even make it past a single page without getting a little triggered. because all this shit triggers me real bad. I mean, after all, it's only a murder of two little girls that's traumatized everyone who's ever come across this story. What's with them having all these aliases? Well, with who are we talking about? Who has the aliases? I mean, the troll farm, the family members. What's up, no name? What's up, no name? Thank you, Citrus. You hear my little boy? He's partying in the background watching a movie. He's watching a Disney Plus movie, so he's partying over there. Case summary: the Indiana Protection Advocacy Services Commission filed this lawsuit on behalf of a group of prisoners with serious mental illness. All right, let's continue. Both defense experts, including Tobin and Warren, are expected to say that firearm analysis is not a science. Ooh, this is rough. This is some truth bomb hitting your ass. Square between the eyes, right? Truth bombs. Firearm analysis is not a science, at least when it comes to the way they try to portray it. There's somewhat of a science to striker or firing pin indentations in a what do you call it? The little capsule that fires. But okay, let's continue. Claim of a unique match is not scientifically valid. Ooh, rough. That's rough for the state, isn't it? Uh, the state was granted a motion to have two representatives assist them at the table who would not be subject to the witness exclusion order. The state argued this was necessary due to the length and complexity of the case. Hey, listen, the state gets whatever the fuck they want. The primer. Thank you, Silent. I'm a little moron. And my brain is so full of stuff right now. Yes, it's the primer. When that firing pin strikes that primer, yes, there may be a uniquely identifiable mark in some instances. But we know that with Delphi, this was not the type of analysis that was being looked at because that firing pin never struck that primer. Okay, continue. The defense was concerned about the credibility of these two representatives. The state intends to call a skilled witness or witnesses to offer opinions on whether Mr. Allen is faking mental illness. Oh, here we go to another gaslight. Remember, and let me say, sorry. Sorry, y'all. Sorry. But this was another case. When I talk about Troll Farm, you think I'm joking. Remember the Troll Farm because you'll hate them for eternity when you figure out who they are and what they've done. They tried to say Alan was faking mental illness. Faking mental illness, meaning he's intentionally almost killing himself by running into the wall. Yeah. And not eating, and eating his own shit and piss. That's called faking. Even when the supervisor of his psychologist says that, yes, he was not faking, and even when they're forcibly medicating him, are you serious? Okay, so if you're forcibly medicating an individual who's faking an illness, are you participating in some sort of malpractice as a medical practitioner? Question for you. So who's wrong? Is Alan faking, or is Walla and her supervisor uh, committing medical malpractice by forcibly medicating him because they know he's faking, but they're still forcibly medicating? Question for you, Troll Farm members. But remember, these Troll Farm members also tried to have you believe that Kathy Allen was ready to divorce her husband because she believes he's guilty. They even went to the extent of setting her up and baiting her into a conversation and and uh and surreptitiously recording that conversation, pretending to care about her, just like they pretend to care for 4 black murdered children that we affectionately refer to as a Flora 4. They pretend to be advocates for these 4 African American children in a county and a city and a state and a region that is historically racist. But they use these 4 dead black bodies to give themselves credibility as victim advocates so that they can troll on what actually matters, which is the Delphi case, which they are trolling for, covering and protecting the actual killers. And not only did they blame or allege that Kathy was ready to divorce Rick and doesn't believe her husband, blah, 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 and secretly record her. But they even went a step further. Sorry, my kid has me distracted. I'm listening to him in there. Just a moment. So let's see. What else did they do that I was trying to dredge up in my memory? Oh, I remember. They took it even a step further. And yes, it's these same people I'm talking about, who I'm going to name to you someday so you can go in shame. They said he molested his daughter. Oh, yeah. And they went on their live streams and they said he molested his daughter. Rick Allen molested his daughter. Remember that? Yeah, little prophets distract. He did distract me. Remember? You forgot that easily that they said he molested his daughter and she took the stand and said no, he did not. They traumatized that. Do you understand how traumatized that girl is? They further traumatized her. Like I said, just like they further traumatized Kathy Allen. And they even ran all through their live streams and all on the YouTube and the Facebook streets. And they said, Kathy doesn't love her husband. She believes he's guilty. And she's to be blamed because she knew that he killed those girls. She protected him. And they even went so far as to contact him behind the scenes to try to get him on the record of saying, yeah, I guess she's leaving me. Do you understand? Like these same, listen, if you think I'm fucking with you, listen to what I'm saying to you. Because these exact same people, not people who talk to them, not people related to them, not friends of theirs, these exact handful of people are the exact handful of people who've published photographs and videos of my mother and father and my children on the internet. They've threatened to kill me. They've sent me mail in my mailbox and others. They made entire live streams about my brother, my murdered brother. They laughed over the murder of my brother. They made a joke of it. These exact people, not other people, not people who talk to them. These exact people who did it to him, who did it to Kathy, who did it to their daughter, they did it to me. And you think it's a fucking joke out here? And let's give a wake up call. They're also doing it to Erica Morris, Christine, are you starting to put a story together in your mind of what's actually going on here? Troll farm. All right, let's continue. We're supposed to be getting through this. All right, so but like I said, they pretend to advocate for victims is what they do. Let's continue before I cry. Trying to get my mind on this. Okay, focus. No electronics. Okay, so here's we're going with the procedure for trial. Let's shift gears because I'm sad now. Okay. Courtroom procedures. No electronics, no drinks, no food. That's how it started until a diabetic started having diabetic issues. And then they changed the rules. Bathrooms and drinking fountains were only on the first floor, and the courtrooms on the third floor. Court recordings were supposed to be public record. There's no recordings available to us. By the way, before I move on from the trolls, since I'm getting all upset, let me just remind you all that they all have ties to Becky Patty. They all have ties to being meth dealers, meth heads, or tied into the meth farm. And some of them are related to Keegan and Tony Klein. Just in case you forgot who they are. I believe some of them were selling photos of these dead girls on the internet. But these people have terrorized the YouTube community for years. They've run everyone off the case. Except the few of us who remain. God bless Rick's name. And Noe and my friends. Okay. Several individuals have been compiling and making court documents and other information available. That Sleuthy Goosey, Yellow Jack Corn Dog, All Eyes on Delphi, and a whole bunch of other fucking people. There's information on the web. Especially, I've appreciated the fact that we are able to download court filings and go through them step by step. And we've done that. Think of the number of hours we've sat here and gone through those documents. Those documents tell us a lot of truth. Hey, let me be clear here, because I know a lot of you get all butthurt about me criticizing the defense. I said this to a person. I said, you know what about the defense that's been amazing, actually? The thing about the defense that has been amazing, that they've been really good at, is that in their filings, they have actually established a really accurate, great, amazing court record. So, despite their failures in the courtroom, in filing world, the defense has done a wonderful job. So, I do give accolades to the defense in a number of ways. Primarily that they've established a really good record. They've produced filings which have consistently brought relevant facts to the surface. Remember, they are the ones who told us that the Abbey on the Bridge Snapchat does not exist. It was never found. They are the one who told us there's a belt at the crime scene and cigarette butts and another device or two. They're the ones who told us the family's phones were never celebrated, or whatever you want to call it. And I mean the whole family. They're the ones who told us that Elvis Fields confessed to his sisters, and Stephanie Thompson, who was murdered and arsoned, which is, the preferred method that they handle people. She polygraphed those two sisters. They also told us that Brad Holder said first he never met Abby. He didn't know who Abby was. Then he says, "Oh yeah, I think I met her once. Then I think I met her twice. And I think I met her 3 times." And by the way, one of those times was at Patrick Westfall's house. They also said, "Hey, we should probably be talking about Ron Logan, Keegan Kline, Tony Klein, and all the Odinists, etc., and the Vinlanders too." But no, we've forgotten all that. So they've done a great job. So what I'm saying about these defense attorneys, yeah, they fucked up majorly in the courtroom in this trial. But as far as producing filings that have been highly accurate, highly productive, and great for establishing a record, the defense attorneys have done a wonderful job. And for that, I want to thank the defense attorneys and give them their kudos, because there's one place they succeeded. It's in those filings, So maybe they're better writers than they are attorneys. Who knows? Okay. Anyway, let me continue. Let's see what we got here. Let's see. I'm trying to hang on to it. All right. Seems like there's someone called No Name. I don't know who that is, but they're coming in with some interesting information. Thank you, No Name, for contributing to the chat. Okay. So let's continue. Let's see. We got digital exhibits present logistical challenges for the jury room. The judge wanted the parties to clarify how the digital evidence should be presented. Burkhart intended to provide details beyond a mere summary of the events. And that's what I'm really grateful for. Like I acknowledge, Burkhart did the absolute best job, in my opinion. Hey, look, there's probably places where I disagree with Burkhart, but you've got to give credit where credit is due. She did an amazing job, an exhaustive job. She was most accurate, and she was generally a cool chick when it came to relaying what actually happened in that courtroom. Because remember, all we got is Burkhart at this point, because we definitely don't have cameras. We don't have transcripts. We don't have exhibits. So why are you doing what you're doing, Prof? Prof, you're annoying. Yes, I'm annoying. Okay, so I'm annoying that I'm using what we have because this is all we have. So if I'm annoying you by covering the trial of Richard Allen with the most accurate source we have, I'm sorry. Maybe you want to go do something else like be entertained. And I'm doing the best I can here. Okay. So let's continue. So good old Burkhart felt an affinity with Mr. Baldwin. She found his presentation to the jury sincere Well, I agree that he's a sincere person, which is probably his downfall, because he probably doesn't. Well, he probably underestimates the nefarious intentions and strategies and techniques of others, which is probably what lost him this trial. You know. Anyway, all right. So let's continue. Miss Burkhart noted Mr. Baldwin's strategy of pointing out what law enforcement should have investigated. Well, it's clear they dropped the ball. The speaker found Mr. McClelland's questioning style scripted. You think? You think? I mean, McClelland's whole thing was a script, and it was an emotionally, narcissistically abusive script. And I've covered that before in my impressions. I'm sure we'll get to it at the end. But remember how I said in his closing statement, McClelland literally narcissistically abused the jurors? Remember, he put up the photos of the autopsy and the gory photos, the close ups of the wounds to the girls before he said, "You see this, you see this, you see this," and he traumatized him, traumatized him, traumatized him. Then he pointed at Richard Allen. He did it. No, but everybody was cool with that. He's a good guy, right? I mean, after all, he's a made man, is he not? Tipton Lodge. Okay, so next up, we got that Andrea didn't like McClelland. So this is saying that this here is saying that McClelland uses hand gestures. He's alarming. He has weird body language. He's lousy. But Mr. Razi, um, he had a chart on burden of proof, which was interesting, and on due process and reasonable doubt. I'm familiar with that graphic actually. Um, Razi effectively used the analogy, and hey, I'll say this: I got to admit this. I think Razi is a badass. Like my feelings on the defense in general. I think that I think Baldwin is a good guy, a nice guy, probably cool to hang out with, talk about music, have some beers, and I don't know, food, burgers and fries. And I think Razi is probably the guy who's like the badass attorney. Anyhow, I'll keep going. The speaker found Jennifer Auger's hypothetical question about an expert misidentifying. Wait, Jennifer. Hmm. I know this is AI having a complication with names, but the speaker noted that most people characterize themselves as listeners during jury selection. The speaker observed that Mr. Allen initially looked wide eyed, nervous, and scared, but seemed to settle in as the day went on. Miss Burkhart does not profess to be completely unbiased, given her background in criminal defense, but aims to report accurately, which I believe she accomplished with a slight bias towards the defense, which is nothing wrong with that. The speaker, Ms. Burkhart, was surprised by the length of the witness list from the defense. Me too, 130 something. That's a lot of witnesses, but obviously they failed. They did not present even half of that witness list. Ms. Burkhart believed obtaining the audio recordings of Mr. Allen's interviews would significantly improve transparency. Oh! Reminds me of something to say to you people on my channel. This is another one that I got a first-hand source for. What's up, y'all? You guys do realize this, because I heard from the horse's mouth. You guys do realize that you're going to get to see Holman's interrogation of Rick Allen, right? In which he went nuts and said, "You're guilty of something, and I'm going to prove it." You do realize you're going to get to see that when these exhibits drop, right? So if we ever get the thumb drive, it should include Jerry Holman screaming and yelling like a maniac at Rick Allen and saying, "You're guilty of something. I'm going to prove it." We should get that, among other things. So, like I said, yeah, you heard him go nuts. He knows I'm getting hype, so the baby's he's getting hype because I'm getting hype. He's not scared. He loves when I get hype. He wants to come high five me, trust me. But I try to keep him out of the camera because of the wackos who threaten to kill us. So we will get to see that, which is why they are delaying. Listen, I've said before, why do you think the judge is delaying the release of this? Let's critical think, because I expect that all of you are awesome. Okay, all of you are awesome. Yeah, Doughboy. I call him Doughboy. Doughboy Holman. Doughboy Holman. Why do you think that this judge is delaying the release of these exhibits? Let's be really sober-minded and honesty with each other. It's very obvious to anyone who thinks like they think. They're delaying this, right? They're delaying this process because they know that for every day that they delay releasing this damning evidence, which means, like, let's be clear here. They've already deleted everything that was pertinent to the Delphi murders investigation. So look, you'll never get the DNA that's going to show you who did this. You'll never get the fingerprints who did this. You'll never get the cell phone dumps of the family, which would prove that they're not being honest about this whole thing. You'll never get any of this. That matters. But you will get the exhibits from the trial, which are the sanitized version of the investigation. But why are they delaying? Well, it's obvious why the judge would delay this. Because for every day that this is delayed, she believes public interest is waning. Okay? So if at the time of the guilty verdict she would have released it, public interest would be at an all-time high. Right? If at the time of sentencing, say, she would have released this, then public interest might have been 75%. Okay, so now maybe, I don't know what, public interest might be 60, say 55, 60%. So she thinks now that public interest might be 60%. So maybe she'll wait until it's like 40 or 30%, maybe another couple months until she finally releases this. So she thinks that the delaying of this, public interest will wane, and that when the public's interest is at a minimum, she's extended the time as far as humanly possible, she'll reluctantly release this, probably piecemeal. That's why we don't have exhibits, and that's why we're reliant upon leaks and things that are done with a lot of consternation and confusion. And that's why we're forced now to be looking at, I don't know, AI notes of a YouTuber's personal take on trial experience. Trust me, the transcripts, you might as well wait 2 more years for that, because imagine the cost that those are going to come at. Yes, transcripts will eventually be available, but at what cost? How many thousands of dollars for those transcripts? Who's going to pay it? I mean, think about it. We've had transcripts before for different hearings. Remember the amazing March 18th hearings? We eventually got those transcripts at the cost of thousands of dollars, some of which was redacted. Well, we'll eventually get transcripts from this trial, but it's going to be another year and at another $10,000 or $20,000. Like I said, you work with what you got, and this is what we got. Let's continue. Let's continue here. Hmm. Let's just go ahead and okay. The speaker noted Judge Gull's seemingly irritable demeanor. Yeah, you think? You think? Okay. The speaker, Ms. Burkhart, provided details about the challenges of reviewing discovery with incarcerated clients. Ms. Burkhart discussed the phenomena of prison lawyers and the burden they carry with post conviction work. Yeah, mate, let me ask you another question before we continue through this. Do you realize what they did to Baldwin and Razi to keep them from being able to see and speak with Richard Allen privately? Remember all of that. You see how all of this is so rich with abuses that it's easy to forget important things that happened, like the video camera being directly on his lips with guards posted within hearing distance while he had attorney's visits, during which they had to leave all their devices behind, go into the back of a commercial uh, moving van of sorts, like sitting on the wheel wells, and be transported from A to B. They made it as difficult as humanly possible for them to even see their clients. And then when they did get in the facility, there was a limited amount of time. He was shackled the whole time, uncomfortable. He had odinous guards over his shoulder, and he had a camera in his face. Remember? Hope you never forgot that. Right. As a pretrial detainee, thank you, Sweet Dude Chibi. These are factual statements I'm making about what actually happened to a pretrial detainee who was merely accused of a crime. But people forget what actually happened. All right, let's continue. I mean, it's for me, it's like I'm flabbergasted. It's inconceivable to me that any of this ever happened, but it all happened, and we all watched it go down. Remember this. Remember when he was arrested, and we're thinking, what's going on with him? And then when that one damning photo leaks of him looking like he's lost 100 pounds, and he's slobbering onto his dirty clothing. Remember all of that? It's easy to forget like that all of that really happened. Anyway, sorry for going on and on. um, let's continue. What does this say? Burkhart believed there might be grounds for civil recourse for Mr. Allen regarding his prison conditions. Yes, and I believe still that that possibility exists. Burkhart discussed an argument that composite sketches support a match to Mr. Allen, but found the state's decision not to use them understandable. She tracked the number of legal pads and pens. Yes, trust me. I know a lot about the pens and pads. Okay, this was an absolute crime that people were forced to take handwritten notes. Okay, like the whole thing was lack of transparency and what do you call it when the telephone meme, where like you have 15 people sitting in there taking handwritten notes. People hear different things because of different ages, different levels of hearing accuracy, different levels of cognition. So you've got all these people sitting in the court, everyone taking notes, everyone with their preconceived biases and all the bullshit. People come out of court with different stories. Remember all that? Remember we had to deal with Aspen Connor and Lauren Hidden True Crime versus Bob Mata and Andrea Burkhart and all the confusion that caused and the lies being told. And you see, that's how we came out with these trolls being able to allege that Richard Allen was, or Kathy Allen was going to divorce her husband because she believed he was guilty, blah, blah, blah. And they whole ran with that, and they did whole live streams over it. And Murder Sheet did whole podcast over it. And they messaged the guy behind the scenes. There was all this fuckery that was involved. And it was allowed, and it was encouraged, and it was actually fostered. It happened because of this whole deal. No cameras in the courtroom, no transcripts of the days of trial, blah, 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 blah. So all of that confusion, it was engineered into this scenario. And you had this judge who was an apparent advocate of cameras in the courtroom, right? Make it make sense. Well, I'll help you. Cameras in the courtroom are used to shame and degrade the defendant when it suits the judge, you see, and the prosecutor. But they didn't want this particular one because they didn't need the shaming and degrading, right? They had the troll farm for that and the podcasters. So what they needed with this one was a complete media blackout so that their deeds would not be seen and transparency would not be had and public criticism would not be accurate. Just so, that's just a refresher. I know most of you already know that. Okay. Now, moving on. Let's see. Andre Burkhart observed Judge Gull's apparent disdain and contempt for the defense team. She detailed the arguments presented regarding the admissibility of Mr. Tobin, explained the differences between Dauber and Frye standards for scientific evidence admissibility. She highlighted the lack of objective standards in firearms and tool mark analysis. She recounted a personal experience demonstrating a firearms examiner's lack of understanding of basic scientific principles like falsifiability. She explained the defense's argument that the late disclosure of digital evidence by the state necessitated a lack of their late disclosure of experts. She noted Judge Gull's seemingly incorrect assumptions about the defense's obligation to provide a summary of expert testimony, blah, 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 blah. This is all a bunch of bullshit. Look, let's talk about libretto and scrimming. Because, you know, I did this mental experiment in my own brain, like I like to do all the time. I mean, after all, I'm a critical thinker. Now, I'm not trying to be mean. Like I said, any of you who try to slander or start shit or try to, you know, oh, Prof doesn't like Rosie and Bob. Listen, that only works for stupid people. Listen, smart people know this. You can actually admit people's faults and their strength at the same time. Two things can be true at once. Okay, so let's think about this. Libretto scrimming. Now, just imagine we're doing a thought experiment. What if they had? Okay, what if Baldwin and Rosie had not been reinstated by the Supreme Court, meaning they would have remained off? What if libretto and scrimming would have remained on the case, knowing that they were Judge Gull's favorite picks for the case, her buddies? Knowing that Mr. Libretto, when he did his interview with, was it Barbara McDonald? He seemed to be very sober-minded, very honest, very startled by the circumstances, very much believed the defense's case and the contents of the Franks memorandum. What if libretto and scrimming would have remained on the case? Do you think things would have turned out differently? I mean, hey, this is an honest question for honest people out there. Because honestly, I believe that had libretto and scrimming remained on, we might have seen a different outcome. Because she was not belligerent. with libretto and scriven. She even allowed them the possibility of a Frank's hearing, where she did not Baldwin and Rossi. She absolutely abhorred Baldwin and Rossi, scoffed at them, hated them, had absolute contempt for them, whereas she did not really show that towards libretto and scriven. So what if libretto and scriven had remained on till trial and throughout trial? I mean, it's a fair question. As a matter of fact, I've told several friends, I would loved, I would still love to speak with either one of them. You know? Anyway, just a little an aside there. Okay. Trooper Ohe was the main CSI investigator tasked with collecting and securing evidence. He was responsible for securing and transporting evidence and entering it into the secure evidence area. Approximately 10 items were recovered from the area of Deer Creek, including clothing, items found in the water, which may have included a phone, allegedly, according to certain sources, the magic bullet, a shoe, and a phone, which means the one under Abby, possibly two phones or more. Approximately 22 items were collected from the scene, including the magic bullet. Item 149 was a bag containing a strand of material taken from between the fingers of Abby's right hand, later identified as a hair. This explains the defense's use of the word entangled. Now, I have a question. I have a statement about this. Now, I know people don't like this, okay? Abby's right hand, a strand of hair entangled, twisted around, pulled out from the root, belonging to one Kelsey German, who's told at least 15 stories of this over the years. No question, because I thought about this since this leak or the release of this video. I don't know, because I forgot to say it. When we were looking at this video, there were so many things to talk about that I actually forgot to say this. But I'll say it now for all of you who happen to be watching, may or may not be watching. Question for you. You've seen the video yourself, right? Surely you have. Surely you've seen that video, right? I mean, I've shown it at least, I don't know, 100 times. I mean, I did the live stream in which I initially presented it. Then I did at least 2 live streams when I went over the audio and we endlessly repeated it. You've seen it. And if you haven't seen it, you can go watch it now. Now, explain to me this. When you look at that video and you see Abby off in the distance and she's walking on the bridge, and she's walking on the bridge and walking, and you think about her, right? You think about her. So she at some point puts on clothing, and then she walks, and then she eventually ends up on this video, right? And then even within the contents of the video, you see her walking on the bridge, right? And then you see her running and she runs past whoever is holding the camera, who we assume to be Libby. She runs past, and she runs. Then she allegedly runs down a hill, and then another hill, and then across a creek, or maybe in a car, or whatever happens, but eventually ends up dead over there on Ron Logan's. Well, question for you. How likely do you think it is? Honestly, honestly, ask yourself, how likely is it that she wakes up in the morning, puts on clothing, gets in a car, well, no, eats breakfast, does all of this, that, and the other, okay, eventually gets in a vehicle, comes to the crime scene, eventually may or may not have put on a sweater, walks that whole distance from the Mears lot all the way to the High Bridge, captured on the video, walking over the bridge with the hands like this, you see, hands like this, runs, passes Libby, if that's who's holding the phone. Indeed, we don't know. Runs down a hill, maybe another hill, maybe gets in a car, maybe goes across a creek, maybe runs up a hill. You know, she's got to get up out of the creek, right? And is up there, maybe struggles, gets undressed, gets redressed, and all that allegedly happens to her body. You tell me, how does that hair remain entangled around that finger on that right hand? Anyone want to answer that question and not gaslight? I mean, let's be honest here. It would never happen. Okay. So listen, what I can't do is factually convey to you how that hair ends up in that hand, entangled in the fingers on the dead body. I cannot factually convey to you how that actually happens. But what I can factually convey to you is there's absolutely zero point. The point is that there's zero likelihood that it ever happens the way that they want you to believe. That she gets out of a car, puts on a sweater, and there's a tangled hair that tangles around her finger, pulled out from the root, and that lasts the entire time as she walks from the Mears lot all the way across the bridge, even though her hands are like this, right? And it doesn't bother her. She doesn't even notice it. And then she runs off the bridge past Libby, if that's even Libby holding the phone, if that's even happening on that date and time and place. And then she runs down a hill and then goes across a creek and takes off clothing and then gets murdered or whatever, and then puts on clothing, or maybe someone puts clothing on her, and she's laid down there and she still has that hair wrapped around her finger. Like, someone explain it to me. I mean, and don't project your fantasy of what the state has told you. Just be absolutely honest about the likelihood of a hair being wrapped around a finger and never coming off through all of those actions. Sorry. With zero factual allegations as to how it happens, all I can tell you is that factually, it cannot happen. It does not happen unless she's intending it. So, are we supposed to believe that Abby loved having that hair wrapped around her fingers? So that her choice was, yeah, I know there's a hair wrapped around my finger, but I just like it. So I'm just going to clench my fist and allow that hair to remain wrapped around my fingers. As I'm running, as I'm crossing the bridge, as I'm walking from the lot to the bridge, as I'm crossing the bridge, as I'm running off the end of the bridge, as I'm running down the hill, as I'm being chased across a creek under gunpoint, and as I'm climbing, even though I'm climbing out of the creek somehow up that bank, I'm still keeping that clenched fist, that fist clenched to retain that hair. And then when I get undressed, I remain with that clenched fist because I love that hair so much. I want to keep that hair. Do you really think that's possible? Come on, man. Like I said, the troll farm wants you to believe this story that's entirely implausible. So for you to believe that story, you have to believe all of that. And how are you to believe all of that? How is any sane person to believe that she intended to retain that hair wrapped around her fingers, even through a life or death struggle, and even through undressing and crossing the creek and all of this stuff that supposedly happened? I'm telling you, I'll never understand it. I just never will, because I actually think about the likelihood of things. I mean, and plus, you know that wet hair clings. Can we all agree with that? Wet hair clings. I mean, surely all of you have gotten out of the shower and you've had a long hair. You know, I have long hair. The long hair clings and you're like, oh, yeah. But dry hair does not cling. It doesn't. So, up until the point she's wet, that hair is not going to cling. You know, that's another factor. For anyone who wants you to believe that hair was clinging for all that time, I mean, that hair does not cling until it's wet. So even at a minimum, that hair's not going to start clinging until she's in the creek, if she ever even was in that creek. So I don't know. It's just me. I happen to think about things the way things actually happen. All right, so let's keep looking. Where are we? The absence of fingernail clippings or swabbing was noted as mind-boggling. I'm not even going to comment upon that. Listen, absence of finger swabs or finger clippings. Mr. Razi established or elicited that Ohe was not aware of any DNA collection that established a connection to Mr. Allen. Mr. Luttrell, who is one of the disgraced prosecutors, objected to this line of questioning, of course, which was sustained, uh, which is not a surprise to anyone who actually follows this case. This judge has sustained every objection from the prosecution for the most part and has denied any objection from the defense for the most part. You know how it goes. This is called a biased judge. The defense's objections were characterized as often focusing on form and trying to interrupt. Oh, that a prosecution was trying to interrupt Mr. Razi. Trooper Ohe conceded that the sticks appeared to be placed by human hands, but believed it was an attempt at concealment. Well, let's get into that. So, Trooper Ohe says, no, the sticks didn't fall on the bodies. Because you remember this? Remember when the troll farm tried to pass the angle regarding the sticks? That the sticks fell on the bodies. See, some of you have not followed this case and didn't realize that. Listen. This troll farm actually tried. Oh, you know they were going to try it, baby. They actually tried to pass off the angle that the sticks fell on the bodies. You can't listen. I could never make this up. This is the most entertaining scenario that I could have ever imagined getting myself involved in. I would have never imagined that some trolls would actually try to pass the assertion that the sticks fell on the bodies at right angles. Oddly enough, yeah, the sticks. No, actually, even Mr. Ohe acknowledges that yes, these sticks were deliberately placed. They were not. They did not fall on the bodies. Okay, so troll farm. Here's the meow, 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 meow. That's the world's smallest violin saying your stupid ass story, Turbo, Mark, Robert, and all of you, that the sticks fell on the bodies. That was never going to fly. Okay, that's called that. Take the L. Okay, take the L. I know you tried. I know you tried. I mean, sometimes it's an overreach. You try too hard. No. Although he would admit to that. He would take that L and say, no, they didn't, the sticks didn't fall on the bodies. They were placed. He had to say, listen, but they were placed by human hands. Okay. But he would not admit that they were intentionally placed. He says they were put there to cover the bodies. But remember, then we had the amazing corrupt officer named Mr. Cicero. Patrick Cicero said, yeah, they only covered 3% at most of the body. So hold on. What's the gaslight from the state troopers? Wait up. So the sticks are deliberately placed on the bodies to hide the bodies, but for some reason, these perpetrators only cover less than 3% of the bodies with these sticks in their deliberate attempt to hide bodies with these sticks at right angles. I don't think that makes sense to anyone who would ever logically, like, at least you'd, like, at most you'd say 50-50, right? 50-50? 50-50 means you don't know. So let's say 50. So at least Mr. Cicero could have said, okay, yeah, 50% of the bodies were covered by these sticks. Because if Cicero would have said 50% of the bodies were covered by the sticks, even if he knowingly, he said that knowingly to be false, it would have at least been, 50-50. I mean, maybe they tried to cover the bodies, maybe they did. No, listen. Cicero gave you the element or the nugget that says, no, they didn't try to cover their bodies. It was only at most 3% or less than 3%. So the sticks did not fall on the bodies, okay? The sticks covered less than 3% of the bodies, which means the sticks were not an attempt to cover the body. Are you getting where I'm going with this? So even though they didn't intend to, because they were separately lying or gaslighting the jury, they could not pull off the scam that the trolls tried to pull off on their behalf, that the sticks were a failed attempt to cover the bodies. The sticks were not a failed attempt to cover the bodies because, hello, go look at the crime scene photos. There were right angles. Okay, let me, piece of advice to you. Even if you're trying to cover the bodies and make a failed attempt, if you do random statistics, you're still not going to get right angles on both bodies. Not to mention the pool of blood that also had sticks at right angles. So I don't know who needs it explained, whether it's troll number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Murder Sheet, Turbo, Mark Robert, Tommy Frost, Jinx, and any of the other assholes who tried to threaten to kill us over the years. Look, let's be honest here. The sticks were never intended to cover the bodies. They were not intended for concealment. They did not fall off the trees, and they were not randomly placed. And you also had 2 experts in Norse paganism and Germanic languages who both, under deposition, conveyed to the defense that these sticks were formed in formations that were an attempt to replicate Germanic runic script, which means runes. But I know most of you don't think for a living who have made these allegations. So you did not foresee that these arguments would be easily defeated and that you would defeat them yourselves with state troopers by having state troopers try to piece together certain elements that don't join together. So I'm just saying. The sticks are placed by human hands. That's what Ohe gave us. And like I said, what Cicero gave us is the sticks only covered less than 3% of the bodies. So were placed by human hands, but were not intended for concealment. I think that means they were intentionally placed for a purpose. Now, the question for me as the prof, as an independent, is what is the purpose? Was the purpose to set up Brad Holder by forming runes that looked like something he would do? Or was the purpose to establish runes as part of an actual sacrifice. That's where I don't know where it goes, okay? Because I don't know who did this. So I don't know. I can't tell you what it is that caused the runes, the bind runes, to be put on these girls, but these clear bind runes were placed on these girls. There was one painted on a tree, and there was one put over a pool of blood. This scene was rife with bind runes. Now, why? Why were these runic signatures or sigils at the scene? I don't know, but it's not what the state wants you to believe, that Richard Allen threw some sticks on the girls or they fell on the girls to try to cover the bodies. Okay, let's continue. Now, shoe impressions were found near ground zero on the banks of the creek, but no effort was made to find their source due to the large search in the area. Trooper Ohe stated that the reason they hadn't looked for fingerprints was the lack of good substrates. Well, now's where I got to talk about a psychic. Because I have a favorite psychic who looked at this and said, you know, there were footprints, and one of the searchers disturbed the footprints to hide them. The same psychic said there were fingerprints and DNA, and someone in law enforcement destroyed the fingerprints and DNA intentionally. And you know what? All that sat really well with me because it would make sense. And then as you go and you look now at the fact that, oh, let's go back to it. Bottom of the page. There were footprints, but they were not really looked at. Psychic says there were footprints that were disturbed. Oh, he says they didn't even look for fingerprints. Psychic says there were fingerprints that were destroyed as well as DNA. Rosie questioned Ohe about blood marks on the tree. Ohe described as evasive in answering those questions. Oddly enough, they don't want to talk about that mark on the tree because it's clear that it's not blood. It's clearly not blood spatter, which is what they try to have their expert convince the jury of. Trooper Ohe conceded that the blood marks appeared to be a large area of contact transfer of blood, but would not speculate on whether it was accidental or deliberate. The defense is likely setting the stage for testimony of a blood spatter expert. Trooper Ohe agreed it was possible a blood spatter expert could have helped even back in 2017, but not one was utilized back then. Did you know that? See, that's a fact that only came out in trial. Now, why not? You have a clear right angle on that tree marked out in the victim's blood that potentially contains fingerprints. But not only do you not get fingerprints off of that, you also don't have a blood spatter expert deal with it. Pardon me, just got a cough. All right, I'm sorry for being difficult and annoying when I am, and if I am, I mean, it's hard to read this without getting upset at every single line, you know? We'll get back to the blood spatter. Um, Ohe would not talk about insect activity. He also could not determine a cause of death and time of death, and he said it's imprecise. Uh, Nobody took measurements of the creek. He didn't think it would be odd to find an unspent cartridge in a rural area of Indiana where hunting is common. Rosie referred to the bullet as the magic bullet. And of course, there was an objection that was sustained by this insane, biased, unhinged, combative judge who presents a conflict of interest. And just like the prosecutor, that no one has ever talked about other than YouTubers. Trooper Ohe said the photos of the bullet or the round taken were perfectly good. Rosie contrasted Trooper Ohe's view on handling of the bullet with photos of FBI agents holding collected clothing. Rosie elicited that Libby had no defensive wounds. Now, you tell me, how is it possible for any lone wolf killer of two little girls using a bladed weapon to kill two little girls in an open space with a bladed weapon and not leave any defensive wounds whatsoever? You can't, because it never happens. All right. Miss Burkhart conveyed that Luttrell's redirect was pointless, and that then Rosie questioned Ohe further about scavenger activity and insects and turkey buzzards, etc. I guess he was trying to establish that those bodies could not have been there very long. All right. Ohe maintained that he would not take more photos of the area where the bullet was found, including close-ups before removing leaves. The jury had many questions, some suggesting technical understanding, particularly regarding cell phone extractions. Trooper Ohe explained the logging and resealing process of evidence at lab involving barcodes and chain of custody. Ohe stated the bullet was collected in its original packaging, not a pillbox as suggested by a previous investigator. Ohe described the process of manually examining a phone in 2017, including documenting and photographing the exterior. And guess what? That's something else we should be privy to should we ever get the public exhibits from this trial. But of course, we haven't gotten them. We may not get them. And who knows what they actually show. Remember, there was this problem when we looked at the defense expert on the phone, Stacey Eldridge, when she described the photos of the phone and how it did not appear to be wet and dirty, how the trolls and the prosecution was trying to allege from a Google search that that's why it logged wired headphones plugged in and wired headphones unplugged. Remember, she said that phone did not appear to be wet or dirty. And then McClellan comes back with a filing that appears to show a phone somewhat wet and dirty. So it's going to be interesting to ever get these trial exhibits and see what photos we're actually referring to. But Ohe described the manual examining and photographing of this phone exterior. And he talks about the Celebrite extractions, which we'll be talking about in a future point. I'll tell you all what I'm working now. What I'm working on now, thanks to a good friend, is the metadata and cell phone analysis of Libby's phone, or the phone that she was in possession of that day. We're going to be talking about that in the future, but not yet. But it's something I'm working on. So, I'm always working on things a week or two ahead of time, and I'm working on it. Okay, so let's continue before we give this a rest. It's almost time to end, y'all. Thanks for being in the chat. I'm apologizing I'm not focusing. I'm trying to blaze through this Andrea Burkhart, okay? Now, the trooper who brought the phone waited for the initial analysis. A camera roll showed a video taken, they are alleging, was at 2:13 on February 13th. The phone extractions, three of them, show a quick and dry or quick and dirty run, a uh, a second run, and a third run in September after a Celebrite update. The witness handling cell phone extraction was the supervisor. He's no longer doing that work. Oberg was described as knowledgeable about cell phone extraction and able to challenge the witness. Search warrants for phones need to be particularized, not broad. The logical extraction is the most basic. A full file system extraction couldn't be done in early 2017, but was done in October 2017, method 3. The witness stated they didn't know the Knowledge C database existed as of October 2017. The Knowledge C database is a function by Apple that data mines various information for personalization, including health data, steps, frequent locations, and power logs. The power log is a second by second log activity of the phone. It seemed the power log off or power off log for Libby's phone is no longer available, which is unfortunate as it could have provided information about why the phone went dark for all those hours. The phone was capable of cell service intermittently, but it leaves a lot of unexplainables, right? The Knowledge C database sounds very important for establishing what made the phone go dark in the middle of the night and come back on at 4:33 a.m. The witness believed the Knowledge C database is produced by DHS, which was questioned as it's likely an Apple product. The extraction might have been done through DHS tools. Okay, now there's so much regarding this. Remember, every time this phone is powered off and on, information is lost. Every time an extraction is done, information is lost. Every time that these various dumps were done, information was lost. We've lost all the information, so much information. It's been a total clusterfuck. This whole thing for me is a tragedy of errors. It's a combination when you take a nexus between incompetence and a cover up. You know, you take a competence, nexus between ignorance and evil. You put them together, you get the Delphi murders investigation. You get people who don't know what the hell they're doing, combined with people who are intentionally trying to cover up, delete, and hide information. I'm telling you, whatever information ever existed should have never have been lost. Remember, they allowed the sister to go in using passwords she inexplicably somehow had to these girls' social media accounts. They allowed her to go in and delete shit, sanitize, whitewash a thing. And this is after this phone had already been sanitized and whitewashed a week before. Immediately after, there was this introduction of these girls to this Anthony Schatz character via Kyla Brummett. So there's been so many deletions, obfuscations, whitewashings, incompetent losses. It's piled on. Okay, layer after layer after layer of deleting, excluding, sanitizing, whitewashing, wiping of information. So you think you got anything left with this case? Like I said, this goes back to the 70 days of deleted interviews. If you think that the 70 days of deleted interviews were done accidentally, you're literally suffering from some sort of mental deficiency. No law enforcement agency on earth, not even in India or any place that you would consider poverty ridden and incompetent, no place on earth would ever delete 70 days of interrogation room interviews. Okay, that was done intentionally. If you don't think that that's just the tip of the iceberg, what makes you think that there weren't 70 fingerprints deleted, 70 strands of hairs or DNA? Come on now. If they deleted 70, if they brazenly deleted 70 days of the interview room, don't you think that they would have also deleted 70 other things that could not be tracked, like let's say tips into the tip line that had not been entered into the Orion database yet. I'm just saying, this is an exercise in critical thinking and logic. They're going to delete whatever the fuck they want. They've deleted 70 days of something that can be tracked, which was the interview room. Like I said, you don't think they're going to delete things that they think can't be discovered? Anyway, I'm not trying to be mean. I want us to have a nice, lighthearted show and laugh and all this stuff. But this is a serious topic. Let's finish up with this, okay? Because we're gonna bring it to a close. I'm tired. Celebrite could not parse the Snapchat database in 2017. How convenient. The witness didn't believe they documented or photographed the locked screens to show notifications before accessing the phone. How convenient. McClellan was noted for improving his questioning technique regarding spelling names. He's considered a good lawyer, which means manipulative and skilled at controlling witnesses and asking targeted questions. There was a discussion about admitting a report containing the original phones, a frame from a video, a modified product, with objections raised by MO regarding the foundation for claims in the report. An agreement was reached to admit certain pages of the report. I don't know who MO is supposed to be in this. This is probably AI confusion. All right. And I say we stop here. I'll read this last one. The defense intended to file something written regarding the opening of the door to composite sketches due to repeated references to them by a witness. All right, so let's end it here, and we'll continue with this on our future episode, the next episode, whereby we cover the trial against Richard Allen. But that's something to we can speak on this real quickly before we get out of here. The general concept of opening the door. Now, let's talk about Reese Davis, Ron Logan, Brad Weber, timelines, Kagan Klein, confessions, other individuals in discovery who have confessed to this crime over the years. Let me ask you, was the door opened? And this is going to be a question for the appeals panel. Was the door opened into third party perpetrators? I mean, shit, given that McClellan knew he had letters from Reese Davis, which he ignored and he refused to turn over, just like he was doing with the Todd Click Odinish report, etc. When he knew he had that, refused to turn it over and didn't turn it over until Todd Click wrote the letter to Baldwin, had him able to specifically request it. Remember, if it were not for Todd Click pushing the issue, Baldwin would have never known, because although it was in discovery, it was not handed over. Now, let me ask you this. Do you know how many confessions by local residents might be in discovery, having never been handed over or having been deleted? How much exculpatory evidence? Let's talk about this. What about those interviews of Kelsey German by the FBI in which she stated they were mean to her 6 or 7 times? Where are all those interviews? Where are all the family's phone dumps? Are you honestly expecting me to believe you never did a family phone dump? How are we to believe that? Interrogations of family members that show conflicting things. I mean, how about like I mentioned, the whole conflict between Anna Williams bringing those girls around on the Sunday, and then you're telling me trial starts, and Derek German takes the stand and says, "No, I brought those girls around." Whoa, who's lying here? Or the conflict between FBI saying in the Ron Logan warrant that those girls were dropped off approximately 1 p.m., 1 p.m., 1 p.m., versus the state now saying that no, it's 1:49 p.m., which is almost 2. So if you say 1:49, that's approximately 2. Approximately 1 is approximately 1. Approximately 2 is approximately 2. So you have conflicts in the timeline. You have conflicts in Brad Weber coming up the driveway at 12:30 in order to scare Richard Allen to leave that phone there at Ron Logan's property at 12:32. I mean 2:30. Sorry, 2:30 versus 2:32 versus FBI and the security camera actually show him pulling up at 2:44, 2:45. Hmm. You see, I find it odd. I find it odd. But remember, we haven't had anything new since trial, right? Since trial. When was trial? Question for all of you critical thinkers. When was trial? How long ago was that? Was a man found guilty of a double homicide and he's now serving a sentence? Not only that, he's also had enough time to be moved to a new facility. He's been sentenced. I mean, then a whole press conference happened in which they all went on about how right they were and how wrong the defense was and how wrong the world is for questioning this. Then they went on an extended PR tour. Yeah, remember that one. They went to, I don't know Murder Sheet, Lauren Hidden True Crime, Carroll County Comet. Who knows where else? Yeah, they made the rounds. What was it? A WRTV or I don't THR. They made all the PR rounds several times. Even the other day, you had Nick McClellan sit his ass up there and blah 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 how right he is and how everyone who thinks differently is a UFO believer, Sasquatch, aliens. They've had all that time. And remember, Greg Ferenczi was killed. Todd Click was arrested. Mitch Westerman, charges dropped, expunged. Shane Meehan, unfit for trial. And Judge Gull, no, you're not getting exhibits unless you can predict and accurately reproduce the exact list that I want in the way that I want at a time that I choose at a cost and expense to all of you that I deem necessary. Might or might not happen, whoever knows. In the meantime, you got Troll Farm smoking up all kind of meth, doing all kind of Adderall and all this other shit. Moving to Indiana to traffic drugs for the family and threatening to kill us for the family, doxing our children, threatening our lives for the family, and all kind of shit on behalf of the family. Hmm. So what's really going on here with the state and the family and all of these actors? Why the PR tour? I'd like to know. And I'm really curious about the attempts to attack Christine and Erica. Why? What is it that you're afraid that they know? Hmm? Oh, question. Where is Monica Walla? Where's John Gallipo? What other lawsuits are they facing or have faced? But no, what they'll have you believe, everyone who says that they threaten you and they ruin your lives and they call your employers and they get your family and they get your children and they have the police go after you, everyone's lying except them. Right? That's the story, right? We're all making it up. We're making up. We're in fantasy world. We're delusional. Everyone who's been contacted by police is delusional, making it up, fantasy world, fairy tale, and they're right. Anyway, y'all, I'm done for now. I'm gonna stop yatching. Okay, look, I'm done for now. We'll do another episode. This will be part one. This will be called part a review of Burkhart's coverage of the trial of Richard Allen, part one. We'll have a part two for sure, and probably a part three and four. It's going to take a while to get through this, but what I'm attempting to do with you is we're trying to baby step through the entire trial all over again so that we remind ourselves of what actually happened in trial without having to go listen to all, I don't know, 1,400 hours or shit. I don't know how many hours, 100. How many hours of Burkhart's coverage? I could do some math. Let's do the math. Okay, let's do the math just to be funny here. I'll do some math so I'm more accurate in my gross generalization. Okay, let's say if she did. Oh, it's more like 140. Okay, yeah. So she did at least, I don't know, 120, 140 hours. So hopefully we can do in 6 hours or 8 hours what she did in 140. And that'll get us caught up on some of the trial coverage. But geez, can't make this shit up. And anyway, what I was going to say is thank you to everyone who's in here. Please support the channel. Yo, we got the Cash App. We got the Buy Me a Coffee. We got the Super Chats. We got the merchandise pathways and all the other support pathways. Mostly, we got the hit the thumbs up and we got the join the live chat and we got the leave the comments down below if you're watching the replay. So, has that message been sent? I always love the comments coming in. And we've been having a lot of comments. Geez, I need to explain to you, just because I think it's worth calling attention to. When we did the video on the audio analysis, which was just 4 days ago, by the way, we did a video going over the audio analysis, and then I released the individual files in my video section. When we did that audio analysis, I have never seen so many comments in my life come through. It was like a tidal wave of comments come on into the channel, and I love those. I love when after we're done, when comments come on in. And when we did the audio analysis, we had the most insane flood of comments come into the channel, and I'm really grateful for that. So that message being, those of you who are on the replay who happen to see this, go ahead and leave comment down below too, because I always love comments, especially when there's a flood of comments. But apparently I've got to hit on something that's really engaging to get the comments coming in. So that's been nice to have all those comments come in. It was so, it's just been really alarming, in a good way, because when I get it, when it comes to the point where I cannot keep up, I know that the channel's doing something right. So we had so many comments and emails come in that I literally couldn't even keep up with them. And I love that because that means I'm doing something right. And Another signal that I'm doing something right is we're almost to 5,000 subs on the main channel. So that means probably in the next show or two, we'll reach that 5,000 subs milestone. And I'm sure I'll make a big deal over it then. But that's a good news for what we do here is that we're almost at 5,000 on main channel. We're easily at 2,600 on the backup channel. Um, so we've got good things happening. And I've always appreciated all of your engagement with the channel and all of you who email me. And thankfully, um, the young lady who produced the train guy video interview, she reached out to me and she asked me to make that video public for you all. So that video has been made public in case you haven't seen it. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, look on my channel for the train guy video. It says train guy, and you'll hear a fascinating story. And this entire incident happened in June of 2017, just months after the murders. And you had someone who encountered an individual on the train who seemed to have intimate knowledge of the crime and the crime scene, and who identically matched the old guy's sketch. And thankfully, our witness for that incident is still alive, still ticking, and he's still here. And so we would like you all to watch the train guy video. And like I said, leave comments all over, share the content, and just generally love each other because I do love you and I want you to love each other. And so thank you so much for being here. God bless you. It's been a Monday night. Can you imagine? Last day of March, March 31st, 2025. And so we'll be into my favorite month, the month of April, next time I see you, which hopefully will be tomorrow, the next day. So God bless you all. Hug your kids, hug your wife. And God bless Libby and Abby. And anyhow, cheers. We'll see you next time. I'm going love up on my little bubby. Okay. God bless.